Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight on our Easter show for tonight, we have Nick Redfern, author of now I think this is his 50th book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know, is his most recent book. I just finished reading it. I love the book. There's so many good takes before. I've read other alien abduction books in my time, but this one really gets in depth with the government files from the Freedom of Information Act that Nick was able to uncover that connect a lot of these cases. And we're going to get into a lot of different topics on this subject, like MyLabs, even the Mothman comes up. There's some stuff we want to talk about that tonight. And of course, every Sunday night is the World Wide Web of Weird, and we got a lot of weird. So let's go ahead and roll into the show. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. As I said before, I'm your host, Jason Bland. I'm a little off my game tonight because I got a mouse, fresh batteries I put in this thing, and it still is acting really weird. I have to, reach to my little touchpad mouse. It's screwing me up so bad tonight. But as I said, we have Nick Redfern as our guest. He'll be on after the World Wide Web of Weird. His book is Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. It's a great book. I totally read through it in a week. Loved it. I wanted to get it right up before the show, so I'm fresh with the topic of the book. And this is a topic that I really wanted to cover. We've had other contactees and abductees like Terry Lovelace on the show. So this is an important subject to me. I've had some of my own experiences recently. So I've been delving a little bit more into the alien abductee phenomenon. So I've been looking really forward to this show. And of course, joining me every Sunday night is my lovely co-host, Jamie D. Let me go ahead and get her up on screen here if I can do this without my mouse. Man, this thing is just not working. It is just being bad. It's making me so I can't, like, control my show. Let me see if I can get it restarted here. It's there. Okay. Let's see. All right. This was really hard, man. This mouse has really gone nuts on me. I might have to buy a whole new mouse. All right, there we go. I can press a button. There's my lovely co-host. How you doing tonight, Jamie D?
Doing well. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you. Been looking forward to this subject. Of course, guys, we will have the phone lines open later in the show if you want to call in. There'll only be 2 phone lines open because Nick's joining us by phone line. So we'll have I'll give out those 2 numbers later in the show. Usually after second commercial break, we'll probably open up the phone lines. Of course, joining me from St. Augustine, Florida himself is Rob Autry. How you doing tonight, Rob?
Doing fantastic. Hope everybody's had a good Easter.
Yeah, I had a good one with the kids today and wore me out. They're not wore out. They're still, one of them is still at least raring to go. So if you hear a kid in the background, that's mine. Nothing weird about that. But speaking of weird, let's do what we do every Sunday night is roll into the World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, you might have remembered it's been probably a couple months ago we covered the mysterious video of the man resurrecting from the dead. It was more of a hoax. We covered that, it's been a couple months ago, but this is from Unexplained Mysteries. Well, that man that was resurrected, well, he's now dead. For those listening on late night, that was an old one. See, I'm getting all screwed up by this dang mouse. It doesn't want to work. It's not working. Let me use the other way. Oh my God, this is driving me nuts. All right. For those listening on Paranormal Soup's 24/7 radio network, we do have a webcast. You can see the show, the videos, and pictures that we're showing at Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup's Facebook page or our YouTube channel under Paranormal Soup or Jason Bland. Go check it out there if you want to watch. Otherwise, just listen. I'll narrate as best as possible. Mystery surrounds the death of the resurrected man. The infamous stunt which saw Prophet Alf Luca of the Elias Ministry, or Elialua, I don't know how to pronounce that, Ministries, International Church, resurrect a man named Elliot in front of a crowd of people in a funeral, was quickly outed as a hoax when it became clear that the man had never actually been dead in the first place. While the crowd seemed to be convinced by the stunt at the time, a viral video of the hoax later landed Lakua in hot water of multiple funeral services suing him for reputational damage. Now things have taken an even more sinister turn following the news that the resurrected man, whose real name is believed to be Thabiso Proud Bajana, I'm really going to butcher that, had actually died in St. Luke's Hospital in Lupane earlier this month after suffering from a mysterious condition that left him vomiting blood. Both Milhan and Luca have been wanted by the police in connection with the resurrection hoax, further adding to suspicion of the circumstances surrounding his death. They specifically said we should attempt to locate a large amount of money which they thought Mahane would have on him, presumably hush money from Luca, said police sources. By the time we located him, he was in a grave. No resurrecting him now. I mean, yeah, it was such an obvious hoax when these guys did it, and it was a viral video. That's why we covered it, but I don't know if that's karma or what, or somebody's up to some shenanigans.
Well, I don't know if he comes back this time.
I don't think so. All right, we've been covering a lot of stuff, and of course, Nick Redfern's a big cryptozoology guy, and he has some stuff. He's in his book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files. There's a part in there where he talks about all the Mothman sightings around the Chicagoland area, and we've been covering it around the Chicagoland area, around the Illinois just in Illinois and Indiana. Well, this one's a Bigfoot sighting in Indiana, which is rare, in my opinion, being from Indiana. This comes from phantomsandmonsters.com. I recently received a telephone call from an eyewitness named KS in reference to a Bigfoot encounter. On the night of March 30th, 2019, around 11:30 p.m., three companions had been at a campground in the vicinity of Turkey Run State Park, located in the Parquet County of Indiana. They had spent the day hiking. KS and the others were in their camper when they heard a loud thumping sound coming from the woods around them. KS and another companion stepped outside and looked in the direction of the thumping. They both observed a hair-covered bipedal creature with large frame hitting a medium-sized tree with a piece of wood. The being was approximately 80 to 100 feet from them and standing at the edge of the woods. KS stated that he is 6'2" and would have stood mid-chest high to this creature. He believes the height to be at least 8 foot. They were shocked at the total size of this being. They also immediately noticed the bright eye shine emitting from the creature. KS' friend ran back to the camper, and KS stood close to the door. The beast was continuously slamming the tree with a piece of wood and then raising its arms into the air and grunting. KS observed this creature for about a minute until it simply turned, grunted, and walked away. There was another camper nearby, but KS did not see anyone. The trio quickly exited the campground and spent the night in the parking lot of several miles away. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be sleeping out there, not even in a camper with something that big. But that was in Indiana, so hey, I mean, you always say, "Oh, I've never seen a Bigfoot. I live in Indiana. It's not really Bigfoot territory," but you know, it's not that far from me. You know, I definitely could make it there, see a Bigfoot. So, I mean,
knocking on your door with a big tree limb.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard there's been Bigfoot sightings in Indiana. They're just not as common as they are in other places in the United States or other places in the world. Just not your regular thing. All right, so we're going to move on to ghost here. This one is of course, another baby monitor. Us freaked out parents with the baby monitors. I remember just looking into my kid's baby monitor and just thinking, I want to see something, but I don't want to see something. It's like the worst thing as a parent. You don't want to see something in the baby monitor. Well, this one comes from mirror.co.uk. Mom spots ghost of great grand soothing her son on baby monitor. Carrie Waterworth, 29, thought it was a spider on the camera in her son Ellie's Gooch room, but claims it was Peggy confronting the 5-year-old boy, confronting. So, a mom claims she spotted the ghost of her son's 90-year-old great-grandmother soothing the sleeping boy on a baby monitor. Carrie Waterworth, 29, figured it was a spider on the camera. We did that part. But the mom was shocked when she realized there was nothing there and claims linear orbs reappeared on the monitor after she went downstairs. She had shared footage of what she claims to be a spectral arm stroking the 5-year-old's leg, tummy, and the top of his head before flying away. And I will admit, this does not look like an orb or anything for people listening. It looks like a arm you can kind of see through.
Yeah.
I mean, it does look like a hand and arm or some kind. It is kind of, and it's stroking him, his head, and yeah. I mean, it really does look like that. I won't deny it. I mean, there might be a logical explanation for this, but it's a bit odd. Not what I want to see in the baby monitor, but it's their grandparent, luckily, checking in on the kid.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I would think so. I mean, I always tell clients to trust their gut instinct. If she felt that was her great-grandmother, then it was her great-grandmother. Let's hope.
Could be the lady in white.
La Llorona. No. But no, I mean, it's an interesting piece of footage. It looks like an arm and a hand trying to stroke it. And it's weird the way it comes out. I mean, could it be a bug? I don't know. I mean, you do kind of see it. It looks a little bit translucent when it goes over the kid. Look, watch. Kind of shoots out there. Yeah. But it does at one point, like, kind of go over the kid's head right there. Like, over the body. Like, she is, like, rubbing his head in his back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pretty
Let
weird.
the audience decide. But let's move on. Number 4, this is another good one since we have Nick Redfern on tonight, is Chupacabra slays 71 farm animals. I think when we had Nick on, it was when I read his book. We were promoting his book, Chupacabra Road Trip. It's another really good book by Nick Redfern you should check out. But a farmer in Mexico lost an astonishing 71 animals to a mysterious nocturnal predator that some suspect could be the infamous Chupacabra. The gruesome slayings reportedly occurred over the course of the last few weeks on Simplicio Martinez's property, which is located near the base of Sierra de Juarez Mountain. Sorry, I probably butchered that. According to the beleaguered farmer, the first incident took place on March 28th when an unknown animal somehow killed 20 of the farmer's sheep in one night. Already reeling from that tremendous loss, Martinez's luck got even worse when the mysterious beast returned to his farm again last week. During this event, a night watchman at the site heard a commotion where the animals are kept and ventured out to investigate. Despite being armed with a machete, the guard opted not to intervene in the situation after he spotted what appeared to be a black creature of tremendous size. The next morning, Martinez discovered that a whopping 51 chickens had been killed by the ferocious predator. I mean, what's the guard's job there? just maybe give him more than a machete.
Chickens, man. That's a lot of chickens.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't check it out. I was a little scared. Well, what's your job? You had one job. As it often the case,
not in my job description.
Right. As is often this case for these type of killings, a number of odd elements surrounding the attacks have raised suspicions that they may have been the work of Chupacabras. Specifically, the farmer noted that the creature apparently entered the chicken coop by way of a hole that it created in the roof, which is at least 6 feet off the ground. That means, Martinez mused, either it climbed or it flew. Additionally, he observed that the predator consistently bites at the jugular of its prey and drains them of their blood, which is another classic method of attack attributed to the fearsome goatsucker. Although local veterinarian insists that the culprit behind the killings was merely a canine of some kind, Martinez is skeptical of that assessment and argues that a dog would not have such precise style of attack. It's not a normal animal, the farmer speculating that it must be some kind of massive beast since it consumed the blood of 20 sheep. Yeah, I mean, what dog is just going to go and kill that many animals? But that is as it may. Martinez simply hopes that the authorities can investigate the matter because he and his neighbors fear that their creature may move on to feasting on humans now that it has decimated the animal population of the farm. I mean, 71 animals is quite a bit and pretty devastating to a farmer. I just don't see a dog killing, draining the blood of 71 animals. Something's suspicious there, especially since it tore a hole through a roof. You know, that seems a bit odd too. All right, let's move on.
Creepers.
Yeah, I mean, about Chupacabra. I think that the book by Nick Redfern he had. There's like really two different kinds, at least, of Chupacabra. There's many different kinds of reports, and some are like dog-like like that, and some are more like winged-like, bat-like creatures. You know, it depends on your area of Chupacabra.
Maybe this next one could be a Chupacabra.
I don't know. Well, yeah, this next one, this is from Yorkshire evenpost.co.uk. A woman is shocked after capturing a photo of a ghost dog which haunts Round Hay. Many articles loading here. Yes, Yorkshire Evening Post. Woman shocked after capturing a photo of ghost dog which haunts Round Hay Park. Let's see. A mythical ghost dog allegedly haunts Leeds' biggest park has been captured on camera. Stephanie Smith was taking a picture of Round Hay Park's Victorian Folly near to Waterloo Lake on a recent visit with her parents and daughter, Danny Louise, 11. But looking back at the picture, Stephanie noticed a strange shadowy figure in the corner. After zooming in and lightening the image, and Lee's mom got shivers down her spine, spotting what looks like a demonic dog lurking in the shadows, looking at a man walking up the steps towards the folly. Freaked out, Stephanie 33 did some and is now convinced the huge black dog is a guy trash, an apparition said to haunt the parks in Yorkshire. The large black demonic creature has been described by some as being the size of a pony and is said to be a foreboding omen scaring unsuspecting walkers. Stephanie, who works as a cleaner, said, I froze when I realized the shadow was some sort of animal. It took me a moment to figure out what it was, but once I could see the head, ears, tail, and legs, there was no mistaking it was a demon dog. It's monstrous, almost like a werewolf, and the worst part is that in its position, like it's going to pounce out, which terrifies me. Like I said, it was hiding away from the light, like I caught it off guard. It spooked me out because I've never seen anything quite like it. Round Hay Park's Folly was built in 1811 by a local builder, George Nuttleton, and had been a subject of past eerie photos taken appearing to show spirits. In 2015, a family snapped a picture showing an outline of a woman on the monument steps. I think we've showed that. My dad said it was a Lashatian, but it could be a ghostly dog. They do say you're able to see a glimpse of it as it passes and goes away. Looking at it, if you look at it, it's hard to see on our thing, but I would love, you see how like it looks like it's got that kind of chicken leg under it? Well, what if that's something else, like a statue, and that's a cat, a black cat sitting on top of it? It's just a guess. But when I look at the picture, it almost looks like that could be a black cat sitting on top of something else, and that leg you see there is not really its leg. It's something it's sitting on top of. I don't know. I would love to see another picture taken there with for reference. But to me, it looks like it could be a cat sitting on top of something else. It makes it look like it has this huge demonic body. I don't know. It is weird looking.
Yeah.
It's my only explanation. I mean, you wouldn't think about the cat in the picture if you're taking it. Cats can kind of sit there and go unnoticed. And then when she looked back, she thought it was a demon dog, but it's like a cat sitting on some kind of statuish thing there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been easy enough to have another picture. And is there a statue there, or is there not?
Right. I mean, she just looked at the picture later, so I'm not blaming her. You know.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if somebody else went out there, took a picture, and be like, "Oh, see the statue? It was a cat sitting on the statue." That'd be a good way to figure that out. Debunk it. If there's nothing sitting there, then it is a bit odd because it does look like it has this leg thing.
Yeah.
That's a bit weird. Okay, let's move on to number 6 here. This is from Futurism.com. This last 2 articles are scientists doing sciencey things. They're sciencing it up. Scientists say new quantum material could download your brain. Scientists say, hold on, my article's messed up. Scientists say they developed a new quantum material that could one day transfer information directly from the human brain to a computer. The research is in its early stage, but invokes an idea of uploading brains to the cloud or hooking people up to a computer to track deep health metrics. Concepts like that now exist in society solely in science fiction before. The new quantum material described in the research published Wednesday in the Journal of New Communications is nickelate lattice. The scientists say could directly translate the brain's electrochemical signals into electrical activity that could be interpreted by a computer. We can confidently say that this is a material is potentially a pathway to building a computer device that would store and transfer memories. Purdue University engineer Shireen Rahamathan, I totally butchered that, said in Science Blog, right now the new material can only detect the activity of some neurotransmitters, so we can't yet upload a whole brain or anything like that. But in the tech process, the research hypothesizes that it could be used to detect neurological diseases or perhaps even store memories. But the one question, people bring this up is like, well, they could copy all your thoughts and memories into a computer and you could live on forever. Well, not really. It's a copy of you. It's not your soul. Because I hear a lot of these people talk about like, oh, eventually we could reach immortality and copy ourselves to a computer. I'm like, you hear the word copy. It's not really you. That does not count. But scientists are... Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to upload my brain because it's a weird place.
Yeah. So what they are going to do is just take your brain out of your body and put it in something else in the Matrix-like style. And speaking of that, it brings us to our last article of the World Wide Web of Weird. I got this off Unexplained Mysteries, but there's a ton of articles out there all over the place. And we've talked about some strange stuff scientists are doing to pigs. This newest one has definitely gone viral. Scientists revive pig brains hours after death. Frankenpig. A recent experiment has called into question our understanding of when a person's brain has truly died. The study, which was conducted by researchers at Yale University, involved hooking up a pig's brain to a special machine which delivered drugs and oxygen by pumping a type of synthetic blood. After 6 hours, the scientists were surprised to discover signs of the brain activity in blood vessels restored, as well as significant reduction in brain cell death. However, there was no indication of brain-wide electrical activity indicative of awareness or consciousness. Thank God for that poor pig. Cell death in the brain occurs across a longer time window than we previously thought, said neuroscientist Professor Niad Sasashian. I'll probably butcher that too. But we are showing the process of cell death is gradual, stepwise process, and at some point, these processes can be either postponed, preserved, or even reversed. While the process of attempting to revive a dead brain might seem a bit gruesome, in the long run, such experiments could prove invaluable in helping to develop a new treatment for brain-damaged patients as well as people suffering from conditions such as dementia and Alzheimer's. The line of research could lead to a whole new way of studying the postmodern brain, said Dr. Andrea Beckel-Michener. It also could stimulate research to develop interventions that promote brain recovery after loss of brain blood flow. What these findings can mean for our definition of brain death, however, remains unclear. But, this is the beginning steps. To revive the brain. If they could figure out a way to revive the brain or save the brain, then they put it in some kind of mechanism and you're in the Matrix or Vanilla Sky.
I'm going to opt out.
Well, I mean, that's the question. Would you, if you were told we can save your brain and put it in a jar, basically, you won't know. You'll be in a virtual Matrix world, like that means this whole concept of Vanilla Sky. You might not even know the difference. It would just be reality to you. Would you, it may be guaranteed afterlife, but how long? Who's paying the bill for that, too? Like, oh, you've run out of money. We're going to shut you off now.
Yeah.
You know,
The
I
brain
mean,
has been disconnected. There's a disconnection fee of. Yeah, I'm gonna pass.
or you got to get a job in the virtual world, pay for it. I don't know.
See, that's it. Yeah, you be a slave here, and then you be a slave in the virtual world.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have a bad time. But yeah, that's it for the Worldwide But Weird. Just one last thing is Lorraine Warren passed away at the age of 92 in her sleep. Never met the woman. Wish you'd been an awesome interviewer, but she was, when I started doing the show, she was definitely getting into her later years of life and retiring pretty much from the field. I would love to met her. I never get to go to conventions and stuff. You know, I've been awesome to meet her. I was definitely, I mean, there's always the critics and there's the controversy to the Warrens, but they helped people when nobody was. They were definitely the forebearers of a lot of paranormal investigators nowadays, for good or bad. But they helped people, no charge, and were a phone call away for anybody who needed help. You know, to me, you can criticize. You know, I saw some critics after she passed. I'm like, you know, you could hold that stuff. No matter what you say, they did try to help people. They were always trying to help people with their situation. That's why I do what I do. I can't banish demons or do it with the stuff they did. You know, but that's why I do the show, so people have at least a place to know they're not crazy. I mean, there weren't paranormal ghost shows or anything like that when they were around.
Yeah.
I mean, they definitely knew how to market themselves in a way to but that was to get the information out there.
Yeah.
You know, so people knew that this stuff was real and that they weren't alone, and they could get other cases by, you know, people seeing, hey, let's call the Warrens. Who else were we going to call back then? Yeah. You know, that's why there's so much movies and stuff dedicated. Now they got The Conjuring, Annabelle. I mean, they've had a huge impact on this field, and they always will. To me, they're definitely the forebearers of paranormal investigating, and a lot of what people do, they learn from them. So it's a sad day in the paranormal world when she passed on, but she lived a full life, and I wish I could have got to talk to her or meet her. That would have been awesome. But that's it for the World Wide Web of Weird. We have Nick Redfern as our guest tonight. Don't forget, we have a Patreon page if you want to go help out the show. The links are in the show description, or just look up Paranormal Soup, Jason Bland on Patreon. Donate $2 a month. You get exclusive access. We have our first podcast up on there about time slips and dimensional shifts. It's about an hour long. I plan on doing these kind of topic podcasts I'm going to put on my Patreon page every month. So check it out. Become a $2 subscriber, and you get instant access to that. All right, guys, we'll be back with our guest, Nick Redfern, after this short commercial break.
You were brought here for one purpose, necromancy.
A ceremony dating back to the pre-Christian era. It's the art of reviving the dead. It requires involvement with evil spirits by the person performing the act.
The devil god brings life to the dead.
No, please. No, please.
And death to the living. Necromancy, starring Orson Welles and Pamela Franklin. From Cinerama releasing. In color, rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
If you are interested in discovering the truth about the want to hear from leading researchers in the field. Join Justin Brown on his 3 weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDev.net.
He is conducting an experiment into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
Hello, I am Fernando Martinez. I think by now you know I am an emotional kind of guy. People stop me in the street and say, Fernando, what the hell is wrong with me? Silk shirt, hairy chest, enough aftershave to drown a household pet, but I still cannot get a woman. I tell them you are an ignorant fool. Without a symbol of power and fertility around your neck, what kind of woman is going to respect you? That is why I have teamed up with Medallion Man, the shop for medallion needs. Medallion Man caters to all levels of masculinity. For the strong, silent type, a medallion the size of a hubcap will say everything that needs to be said. Even singing medallions for the Casanova, who knows music is the food of love. Model trains, dollhouses, diapers, whatever your interest, we've got the medallion for you. Don't forget, every woman knows if you can't support a medallion, you can't support a family.
This is the sound of a space clock aboard a U.S. satellite 180 miles above the Earth. No one winds up this timepiece. It's powered by a tiny battery, a battery that delivers power for years without replacement. Now the same type of battery, the Duracell battery, can bring new reliability and long life to your battery-operated equipment. Radios, cameras, toys, all run far longer. Duracell batteries, the long-distance power cells, outlast any ordinary battery. The same type of battery that keeps space clocks running for years can bring long life to anything powered by batteries. Dura, as in durable. Cell, as in power cell. The Duracell battery, made by Mallory.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe, 5 by 5.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Nick Redfern. We had him on the show a couple years ago. It was his book, Chupacabra Road Trip, and we had him on. We had some technical difficulties, but it was still a great show because Nick is such a prolific author. I think this is his 50th book. Nick is an author of numerous books on conspiracy theories and paranormal and unexplained mysteries. He has appeared on more than 70 TV shows, including Fox News, the BBC Out of This World, History Channel's Monster Quest, American Book of Secrets, Ancient Aliens, and UFO Hunters, and the National Geographic's channel, Paranatural. Originally from the UK, Nick now lives in Dallas, Texas. Tonight, we're going to be talking about his book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. I just finished reading this book. There's so many good topics, so many things I've been personally interested in. I know some of you people have heard me mention my helicopter experience with a former guest, Terry Lovelace, an alien abductee, and I had a possible black helicopter incident with him being a guest. And so I became a believer, and I've been getting more into this subject. So Nick being on this show is perfect for me because I have so many questions, and I'm sure you do tonight. We will have the phone lines open after the second commercial break. You'll be able to call in. I know I have some alien abductee fans that watch the show. Please call in and with your questions tonight. I will give those phone lines out. They'll be two open later in the show. But let's go ahead and get to our guest. You there with me, Nick?
Oh, hey, Jason. Yep. Don't worry, I haven't been abducted.
You never know. You never know. Well, I truly enjoyed the book, Nick, and I'm so happy to have you back on the show, especially to talk about this subject tonight.
Oh, well, thanks.
So what got you, I mean, you've written, like, I think this is your 50th book? I think you have about 50?
It's round about that. I have to, I'm at that point where I have to sort of stand up at the shelves and actually count them just to make sure I've got it right. So,
you have so many books out there. I know I read one of them before I really knew who you were. I just by chance read one of your books. I can't remember which one. It was on Men in Black because there was a lot of great books out there on that subject, and I thought yours was one of the best ones. So many good topics. You cover a lot of stuff on. I mean, we had you on here with the Chupacabra road trip, which was an excellent book, and we had a Chupacabra story tonight too on our World Wide Web of Weird. You really cover the cryptozoology stuff so well. You're kind of a man on the street because you actually go to these places to check out these creatures. You live in the dream.
Yeah, well, I think if you're going to write about something, you know, the best way to actually write a book or an article is actually to go out first and do the research and get the information. And that's, for people who don't know, Chupacabra Road Trip, as the title kind of suggests, I guess, is that I've been on a lot of expeditions to Puerto Rico, Central America, Mexico, the US, looking for the Chupacabra. And so that book's sort of written in like a road trip style, you know, like a diary, sort of going around different parts of the world trying to solve not just that riddle, you know, but Bigfoot and lake monsters. And I never really understand when people write a book, but it's all just sort of taken from existing sources,
rehashed,
or the internet. What's the point? You know, why don't you just go out and do it yourself? And I think people appreciate that more because going out and investigating stuff, invariably you always get new information and new sources. I mean, what I usually do, you know, if there's been a Bigfoot site in a little town, you know, and I'm able to get out there, you know, the first thing I do is you stop off at the local gas station, you know, the local restaurant, local bar, and say, hey, you know, who knows something about the latest Bigfoot sighting? And, you know, somebody will say, I'll go talk to Bob who works at the gas station, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's the best way to get information, you know.
I just had a story tonight. I'm from Indiana, and there was a recent one from Fortean Times Monsters, a story of somebody in March that had a Bigfoot encounter in Indiana. And I always say, well, I've never seen a Bigfoot. I'm not in Bigfoot territory, but heck, and even Indiana, they've had some sightings. And I guess that's what makes cryptozoology kind of cool because it's something you can physically might have a chance, going to see. A UFO happens, it's a who knows where the next one's going to happen, but if you know a Bigfoot stopping somewhere, you know where to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's why probably cryptozoology is probably my sort of favorite thing to write about, and also the Men in Black phenomenon, which I've done about 4 or 5 books on that subject. And but for things like lake monsters, you're right, you know, I mean, if there are strange creatures in some of the lakes of our planet, well, they're sort of locked in those lakes, you know, and with a UFO, it's a random event, and it might be sort of a week or 10 days after you get the story, and no disrespect to the witness, but there isn't much you can do, you know, when the witness has got a great account, you know, a great story, but the physical evidence, you know, is long gone. But something like a lake monster, at least you can sort of stake out the lake over a period of days, weeks, whatever, and, you know, hope to find something that way.
And maybe have a good time while you do it, you know, at least relax.
Yeah, have a good time as well. Yeah, there's no point being bored while you're doing it. That's pointless.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Chupacabra road trip, I think one of the things most memorable about that book was I think you and your friend almost getting shot and killed while you're down there. So sometimes maybe not so much fun.
Yeah, well, that was all to do with a guy who had some photographs and tried to sell them to us for a bunch of dollars.
Yeah.
And we knew immediately they were actually photographs of alligator tracks, and this was in this little town in Puerto Rico, and he sort of was screaming and shouting, and the next thing somebody came out with a gun, and but you know, I've been in equally worse situations. It's one of those things that's just part of the adventure, you know.
Well, I hate to say your trauma down in South America was my enjoyment in that book, but it was one of the best parts of the book, I have to say. But what took you down the road of doing this? I mean, you've done other books on alien and the subject, but the alien abduction files. What took you down this road with this book?
Well, I guess like most writers, most authors, you know, if you write a book, people write to the care of the, you know, to your care of the publisher, that kind of thing, and share their stories. That happens a lot. And I think, you know, if somebody writes a book on, I don't know, the Kennedy assassination or Bigfoot or whatever, they get feedback back in the same way that I do.
Right.
And over the years, you know, I found a trend, not a huge trend, but a big enough trend to sort of write about it. And that was emails, messages, Facebook messages from people who had alien abduction experiences, whether as one-off events or as lifelong events. And on a number of occasions, they seem to be under surveillance.
Right.
Or in some cases, they've been visited by military personnel, and in some cases been visited and threatened by sort of the creepier Men in Black type characters. And over the years, I got more and more reports to where I thought, well, you know, there's enough new material here to write a book on an aspect of the alien abduction phenomenon, which hasn't really been covered to a really significant degree. For example, you know, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of books on alien abductions, like, you know, Whitley Strieber's Communion, John Mack's books, Bud Hopkins, and so on. But as I said, nobody had really done a full-length book on the idea that somebody in government was taking an interest in the abductees. So I got all the information together one day, or over a couple of days, I should say, and put it all together and thought, wow, you know, there is enough material. So I spoke to my agent, Lisa, and she thought it was a good idea, again, primarily because this was largely a new subject, you know, in terms of book length. And the publisher liked it, and it just went from there then, really.
Well, that's what I kind of like about the book, is that you include photos and copies of some of these files obtained from the Freedom of Information Act and relate to how what's most interesting is the military's interest in the abduction cases. When we had a friend of mine, Terry Lovelace, who's an alien abductee, on the show, the first time I think I had him on, one of the things I focused on in his story and experience was when he was in the Air Force, they hypnotized him. The Air Force, a colonel, if I remember right, did. And they knew that what it all revealed was they knew exactly about these experiences. They knew exactly what was going on. And were responding to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I found on a lot of occasions was that, you know, the agencies or, whatever agency it is that's sending these people out, they do seem to know a lot about the subject. But equally, one of the trends that I found was that I don't think the government as a whole has a full understanding of the phenomenon, because in a lot of the cases where people who I spoke to had been interviewed, it wasn't like, you know, you won't talk about this. It wasn't like a threatening Man in Black type of thing. It was more along the lines of, hey, we know you've had these experiences. We prefer you don't share it outside of this room today. But, you know, we're concerned about these cases, and we're trying to speak to a number of people in the abduction field. And it was, you know, it's not a huge amount, because if it was a huge amount that were being monitored and interviewed, the story would have come out much quicker. So I think what they're doing, and the evidence kind of suggests this, that they've sort of carefully and tactfully approached a small number, but from a small number you can still put together the trend, you know. But what the biggest thing that I kind of found, which was like really eye-opening, was that the government, you know, didn't and probably still doesn't really understand what is at the heart of the abductions. And I guess, with governments, you assume, rightly or wrongly, that they've got the answers, but I think they haven't. And I think their concerns are driven by that purely alone, that they don't know what's going on, and they are concerned by why a lot of abductees have had apocalyptic dreams and nightmares, and most of the people I interviewed said that it wasn't like a stressful, intimidating interview. It was, like I said, it was more along the lines of, we'd rather you didn't say anything, just keep it to yourself, but can we just chat with you for a while about your experience? So in that sense, I think they're concerned, but they're not exactly why. They're not exactly sure why they're concerned.
Plus, the whole Tom DeLonge and the disclosure thing this last year or so, I've had my doubts. I just don't see them disclosing much of anything, because I like you, I believe that they don't know what's going on, and without that answer, they're not ready to reveal that to the public because of basically, hey folks, your people are getting abducted. We're not sure why. We can't stop them. So just so you know, people aren't going to handle that probably too well.
Yeah, and I think there are some weird subjects or sub-subjects within the abduction arena. Like, for example, I mentioned apocalyptic dreams.
Right.
Then you've got the alien implant aspect to all of this, and when you have these creatures, these entities, the greys, these little figures with a big head and a black eyes, well, people say, well, they're our friends, they're here to help us, and well, my answer to that is, well, what have they actually done to help the planet? I don't see much, really. We're living in a pretty volatile world right now, and and I am a believer in global warming, regardless of what certain people say to the contrary. And there are major problems on the planet. So where and under what circumstances are they helping us? Well, they tell us, that they're our friends, or what they're doing is for our good, but it's just their word. And I mean,
and they're taking people by force, so that doesn't make them very trustworthy.
Yeah, and I mean, so in that sense, you can well understand why people in government may be concerned, because they're staying in the shadows. They're not really doing much to help us, at least as we can see it.
Right.
And they keep assuring us that we're, that they're here to help us. But like I said, I mean, show me the money.
Well, there's $1 trillion missing somewhere from our government. That's where the money is in these big projects. Now, you do start out the novel kind of covering the other aspect of this, is the contactee phenomenon, which is people willingly going with the aliens and not being taken in the middle of the night, and the government's interest in these people. You kind of get into the fact of the message of the aliens, and their society seems to be kind of communist, and that kind of frightened our government.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason I mention this, for people who don't know, the contactees, the abduction phenomenon, it didn't begin with the Betty and Barney Hill case in '61, but it was certainly the one that became the one that really kicked the whole thing off, and became sort of famous. But, a decade or so more before the Hill case in '61, you had the contactees, people like George Adamski, Truman Bethram, George Van Tassel, Orfeo Angelucci, and various others who claimed to have met very human-looking aliens out in the desert. And in many cases, they would say they want us to lay down our atomic weapons and live in peace with each other. And many of the sort of recommendations, if you like, of the aliens and the way to live, it actually sounded very much like communism.
Right.
Now, what happened was, if, say, for example, someone like George Adamski was just talking to, 5 or 10 people in a local library on a Sunday afternoon, nobody would care. The FBI certainly wouldn't care at all. But George Adamski's first book, Flying Saucers Have Landed, which was published in 1953. That book sold in excess of 100,000 copies, and George Adamski was actually saying publicly in his lectures that communism was the way of the future, and
that will get you on
Russia's
the FBI's
gonna...
watch list.
Yeah, well, bear in mind, this was the early 50s, you know,
right.
when you had McCarthyism and all the Reds under the beds scares. And so in that sense, you know, when you've got someone whose first book, first published UFO book, sells more than 100,000 copies, and he's telling people communism is wonderful, you can easily understand how and why the FBI got interested or concerned. Now, I'll give you an example. George Adamski's FBI file is just over 400 pages long.
Wow.
And George Van Tassel's, who constructed the famous Integratron building out in California desert, his is about 330 pages. So, you know, these people were taken seriously in the sense that by telling these accounts that they were getting significant feedback from the American public, and that was the big concern. And so, but the other reason why I include this in the book is because if skeptics say, well, there's no such things as files on people who've met aliens, you know, there's no reason for the government to watch, you know, abductees, my answer is, well, go and look at go to the library, the reading library at the FBI in Washington, D.C., and they'll be happy to, you know, show you, and you can read it, the 400 pages of George Adamski, the 300 and something pages on George Van Tassel. Those are surveillance files on people who claim to have met aliens. So, in other words, it actually makes sense that the contactee phenomenon, when that kind of slowed down and the abduction phenomenon began, you can easily understand as to why the government would keep the abductees under surveillance, because history has shown they kept the contactees under surveillance. So it's just a transition that's, you know, gone on and on, really.
Well, you have to, you know, logically, too, if you had somebody going around that's selling books, preaching communism, wherever his source, alien or not, the government might have suspected them of being a commie, Ruski, you know, infiltrator, preaching communism with whatever means.
Yeah, that's an important thing to note. I mean, it wasn't just for the alien angle. You're right. I mean, if anyone writes a book and it sells 100,000 copies in the early 50s and, you know, the author is saying that communism is great, well, it doesn't matter who they are, you know, they're going to be watched.
Yep.
But, you know, the important thing is, you know, we do have a situation where, you know, it's rolled over into the UFO phenomenon and has never really gone away, you know.
Well, when you get into the abductee phenomenon, you know, these are people that aren't, you know, trying to sell a book or anything. They're people who have experienced something, and when the government checks in on them and they hear these stories, they're still getting kind of some of these, like, apocalyptic visions from these people and aliens who are somewhat maybe communist, you know, so it's probably not comforting to our government.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of what they are, you know, in terms of how they live, I think the one thing that does concern the government is the fact that they are so different to us. And I think from at least what some insiders have said, the government is concerned that these creatures, whatever you want to call them, has the ability to sort of alter our society, you know, and our belief systems and change them, you know, in a way which isn't being done by us as time goes along, but is being done deliberately by these entities. So, you know, I think that's one of the fears, is that are these things going to try and change our way of life? You know?
What I also loved about this book that you get into is something I'm curious about, is the MyLab. You know, especially the early on when you talk about, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the farmer, but the farmer who's taken, and to him it's a UFO experience, but the way you lay it out and with the documentation of that, it really does appear like he was hijacked by some government PSYOP operation. And
you're talking about Antonio
yes.
Villas-Boas?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is a really weird story. His case goes back to the 1950s, and he was back in that era. He was a farmer in Brazil, and he had a weird experience because he kind of crossed over between the contactee movement and the alien abduction movement. That's to say, he didn't meet like bug-eyed, black-eyed little creatures, but he was forced against his will to go on board a UFO. So it has components of the abduction angle, but the aliens are very human-looking. And so in that sense, it had the crossover with the contactees. But he claims he was taken on board this craft and subjected to medical experimentation. And according to Villas-Boas, he had sex with this hot-looking alien woman. And which I guess is far more better than, being probed by the Greys or whatever.
Way better experience than being alien probed by a gray alien, I'm sure.
Exactly.
She had like what, pink? She had like pink, like armpit hair or down there hair, and like was really kind of like a Barbarella kind of experience.
Yeah,
That's what I picture in my mind.
Like sort of Space Girls from Venus, kind of like, some B movie.
This poor guy.
Movie, that kind of thing. But the weird thing about the story is that it sounds very much like that Villas-Boas had been drugged, and on top of that, when you listen or read his description of the craft he was taken onto, and it's important to note that he was already in like a mind-altered state
like they
when he was
gassed
taken
him
on
or
board.
something.
Yes, like some sort of mind-altering substance, like an aerosol type phenomenon. But he said that the craft seemed like elongated, and something was spinning on top of it extremely fast, and it was making a noise like whoop, 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 whoop. You put all that together, it kind of sounds like a helicopter.
Exactly.
Now, a guy came forward named Bosko Nedeljkovic, who did work for the CIA and the State Department, and he said that that's what it was. It was basically a staged event. And so people said, well, why on earth would the government fake an alien abduction? And his basically response to all of this was that the government had concerns about the nature of the real abductions, all this stuff about changing our way of life and, these apocalyptic dreams. And he said that they were trying to fake, if you like, a couple of alien abduction events to make it look like something far more benevolent by creating their own event. In other words, people would come round to the idea that it was all benevolent, and so if the real events weren't benevolent, well, let's just fake some and seed the story out there, and people will be more comfortable with that kind of scenario. So, it's a really strange situation when you have real abductions and you have faked, bogus abduction stories created by agencies to try and present the phenomenon of abductions in a different light. So it becomes to be, like a really controversial and convoluted situation when you're trying to figure it all out.
It seems like it's always gone, though, in the UFO field with the government, that their disinformation operation works like that they will put fake stuff out there that's close to the truth just to throw you off and discount all the other real stuff.
Well, I think one of the reasons why this is because, it's impossible for any government in any country to hide just about every secret out there. So if you cannot hide the truth, the best thing to do is to manipulate it and mix it up. For example, if you look at all the different theories that are out there for Roswell, the figure now is like, it's literally like 15. You've got the UFO angle, weather balloon, the government mogul balloons, time travelers, Russian.
I like the time traveler.
Yeah, you've got lots of different theories. And I wouldn't be surprised at all. Whatever the true story is, I wouldn't be surprised if a good number of the other ones have been sort of seeded out there by intelligence agencies because they know the truth about Roswell cannot be hidden. So what do? Well, you confuse it by swamping it with conflicting stories that, like I said, are now up to 15 in numbers. So that kind of thing does happen a lot, where if an agency cannot hide something, it swamps the research community like us with a bunch of different bogus stories. And, we end up with our heads spinning, not knowing in which direction to go at all,
Well, they say they're even doing that like on YouTube and that, like if there's a UFO sighting in some place in the world at some date and somebody has a really good footage, they'll go put up the same date, same place, but put up some bogus footage to like discount people from seeing that footage, basically. Like, oh yeah, I saw it was fake. They're even meddling on the internet like that to try to dissuade stories if they're that fearful.
Yeah, and I mean that sort of demonstrates the there is a real phenomenon, and for some reason, it has to be confused and mixed up, so we just don't get the full picture. But like I said, I don't even believe the government has the full picture. I mean, obviously they know more than we do, but when it comes to nailing it down and it's this or it's that, I think, they're still struggling as much as we are, really. It's like, the big irony could be we're talking about all this now, and there could be two generals in the Pentagon right now saying, I wonder what really crashed at Roswell. Because even some of the guys in government, they're not going to tell everybody. It's like, unless you have a need to know, it's not like you join the CIA and they tell you what happened at Roswell. That would be ridiculous, you know. You're just told, what work you need to know for your particular job. So that kind of thing could quite easily happen, the idea that even within governments, most people probably don't know anything about this at all. They get their information from watching the History Channel or whatever, So, really, because they're not cleared to know, what really is going on.
Well, we just had, it was a couple of weeks ago on the Worldwide Bubble Weird, what was the... was it the ex-Polish president that came out, was talking about aliens and
Walesa.
Yeah, and but he's seen all that stuff on YouTube, and it's not the stuff he got from the officially while being in the government. He knows as much as we do on it. So it's like, oh, okay. You don't have any inside information, but that's what the thing. I mean, Bill Clinton. There was a famous story of Bill Clinton trying to find out about Roswell and all that stuff, and getting shut down as well. It could be all in the private sector now.
Yeah, he was basically told, sorry, but no, and that demonstrates that, even if you're the president, you're not necessarily going to know. I mean, because very often, a president's only in office for 4 years. But a lot of these intelligence guys that are hiding the really deep secrets, they're in those positions like 20 years, 25 years. They start their career at 25 or whatever, and they go through the ranks of the intelligence services. They could be still be there when they're 55, 60. A president, could be out after 4 years. So that's why I think sometimes the people you think would know the truth actually are outside of it, that they don't know.
Well, they can't trust a president to keep his mouth shut about
That's
it.
right, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And maybe a particular president right now, I could not imagine keeping his mouth quiet about it. So I'm just, there's the whole Kennedy assassination. Did John F. Kennedy know something? There's the conspiracy theories that he was going to blow the lid open, and that's why they took him out. I can imagine. One of the things I think about is Eisenhower, when he left office, warned us of the military-industrial complex. There's a lot of the rumors that Eisenhower helped set up the private sector that took over the basically the whole UFO project, and then they lost control of it to the private sector.
Well, yeah, and there's actually, in terms of the secrecy, that works well in another way because, if you, let's say, for example, hypothetically, that there are alien bodies stored away from somewhere. Now, let's say back in the 50s, they were held at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was a military installation. Right. But let's say now, the bodies have been handed over to some sort of, scientific company, which is in the private sector. Well, a lot of people don't know that the Freedom of Information Act doesn't cover private sector information. So in other words, you could file a Freedom of Information request with Wright-Patterson, for any files on dead aliens. But if, ABC 123 company, that does research into DNA and cells, and they're the ones who've got the bodies, you cannot file a request with them because they're not a government agency. And even if they're doing government work, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's the fact that they're a private sector company means that they are
It's their
outside
proprietary
the law when it comes to the Freedom of Information Act. You cannot access their material by filing a Freedom of Information request.
And also, Congress. It kind of keeps Congress from digging into what's going on, senators, and from figuring out. Because, what was it? I lost the senator's name. Reed? Started this whole thing, too. It looked like he had interest, but maybe he was just trying to dig in and find out because he didn't have any access. That this is why they went dark. They can't trust elected officials who, like you said, are in office for 4 years, 6 years, depending on what office, and what they're going to do with that information.
Yeah, so, there's plenty of ways in which, information can be hidden, and part of it is just not telling people who don't need to know, and the other part is, like you said, sort of farming it out to the private sector, and also just burying stuff so deeply that you don't really have a chance of finding it. And sometimes when I say burying, I mean literally, probably in bunkers 50 feet underground or whatever, which no one will ever get access to. So.
Right, and we'll never know. There's no Freedom of Information Act that's ever going to get that revealed. It's going to stay buried, stay dead. It's just people, the witnesses that finally come out and speak that you get this information. Now, you cover when you get into the abduction experiences, you cover cases in America and in England using the Freedom of Information Act in both countries. I can imagine... I know you live here in the States and all that, and you used to live in England, but how difficult that is to get that kind of information from, like, where you're here in the U.S. trying to get information from England about a case.
Well, yeah, I would say in terms of how it works, a lot of people think that when it comes to getting information that it's like, go away, we're not going to help you. It's actually not like that. I've never had an issue where, for example, there's been anything like that. I've always found them, particularly the FBI, to be really helpful in terms of what they can release, and they'll tell you, we cannot release this or we cannot release that. But when it comes to the stuff that they can release, they've gone a long way to really releasing a lot of good stuff. This isn't really directly connected to the UFOs, but for example, the Albert Einstein file, that's like thousands and thousands of pages. And for people who are interested in, like, how the FBI, were watching a lot of celebrities back in the 50s and 60s, like Marilyn Monroe. The Frank Sinatra file, that is thousands of pages. They've released
John Lennon.
All those thousands of pages. John Lennon. Now, sometimes it does take a few efforts to get the files and the material, but in many cases, they have released it. So, if you do it the right way, you can get material, but then on other occasions, it doesn't work. But, for the most part, they're not sinister people saying, go away, we're not going to help. A lot of them are more like sort of a librarian, whose job it is to sort of...
They're doing a job.
Check. Yeah, and they're sort of going through the archives and seeing what they can release and what cannot be released. But if you go to the FBI's website, which is called The Vault, if you just Google FBI Vault, it'll take you to the website, and you can download. Not all the files that they've declassified are on the website. That would just make it too huge. But most of the really interesting ones are on there, and there are hundreds and hundreds, which run to probably millions of pages altogether that have been released, and it's kind of the same in the UK. But if they can release it, they will. There are other occasions where they're like, well, this particular file is classified for the next 30 years. I mean, there have been examples like that,
Yeah.
And it's not like, where they say, you can make a request and we'll consider it. It's like, no, it's 30 years, you got to wait.
Oh, man. Now, when you started looking into the cases of abduction and, like, the military and the FBI and the government's interest in it, and then in England, did you notice, like, did they kind of start up around the same time? Was it like the same, they both started taking interest around the same time, or did somebody else kind of copy the other and start getting interested in it?
Well, that's one of the interesting things, because in the early 1960s, and we know this now because some of the documents have surfaced, there's one arm of the British Royal Air Force called the Provost and Security Services, and they're sort of what you might call the James Bonds of the British Royal Air Force, which is the equivalent to the US Air Force. And they would get involved in, like, disinformation, espionage operations, spying, counterintelligence, all this kind of thing. And one of the things that I found is when the government started to declassify some of its early 1960s era files, which was the same era, early 1960s was the same as the Betty and Barney Hill time. Well, the British files, many of them were investigated, or the cases were investigated, I should say, by the Provost and Security Services. And what's really interesting is that many of the files they put together were on encounters reported to, like, the local police or local airbase, who were young girls and who'd had, like, middle-of-the-night encounters where something came to the window and they couldn't remember anything else. And, it's kind of like you get a lot of abduction stories to this day, from young girls where they have these experiences and then, they get older and then eggs are taken from them and things like that. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the British reports began pretty much the same time as the US ones, early 60s, and, you've got sort of the elite of the Royal Air Force, the Provost and Security Services, looking at these, but also looking particularly at cases involving young girls, and also people who had seen UFOs late at night and they're driving home and their car engine cuts out, and then in some cases they had missing time, and then, an hour had gone by and suddenly the car engine kicks in again and they realize a couple of hours has gone by. They also collected a lot of those cases. So I think we can make a good case that they were actually seeing a trend at work here, just like, the intelligence people were over here. And they were seeing the trend was missing time, vehicle interference cases, and young girls having these sort of memory losses and, things coming to the window at 3 a.m. in the morning or whatever.
Well, that's like I mentioned in my introduction about my friend Terry Lovelace and his abduction experiences when the military, he was in the Air Force, were hypnotizing him. There was some kind of comment, the guy who was doing this to him in the Air Force says, "Oh, this is common for them to have this missing time," and whatever. He makes a comment like, "Oh yeah, like they know a lot about this. May not know why or what's going on, but they know a lot about this phenomenon." That's what was clear to me in his experience, and that's kind of scary that they know about this and they're keeping it quiet. It's like, did we make some? The one biggest conspiracy theory out there is that we made some kind of agreement for technology, and that's why they're taking us.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different theories, as to why this is all going on, and is it friendly, is it benevolent, or is it just we're just seen as lab rats or something like that? They don't really give a damn either way. I think we can look at it from a lot of different perspectives, but I mean, in terms of, like you said about your friend, I mean, it would make sense. I mean, when you've got substantial percentage of the population, I mean, it's not in the millions, but it's still a high number of people who have reported abductions. It would make pure sense, for somebody in government to sit up and say, "Hey, don't you think we ought to look into this? It's becoming like a bit of an epidemic."
Right.
To ignore it would be, going totally against the grain, so to speak. It would be, it would be the thing you would expect an agency to actually do, not ignore it.
Well, I found that interesting too. I mean, one of the most famous cases you brought up is the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. That even the government's interest in their case, and that they were interviewed.
Yeah, and I talk about that in the book. I mean, the Betty and Barney Hill case is one of the most famous ones, mainly because it was really the first one that exposed people, for the most part, to the abduction phenomenon. And, you know, you had the sort of accompanying aspect of missing time and being sort of studied medically and so on. And then finding themselves back at home, you know, driving home and find that a couple of hours has gone by, starting to get weird dreams and nightmares. And when you put all that together, you know, that is really the defining case. You know, it wasn't the first one, but it was the one that became the most famous. And I think, you know, when you look at that case, that's sort of the most important one, you know, where it becomes like a template for everything that came after. But a lot of people don't know, you know, to get back to your points about the documents, a lot of people don't know that there are somewhere in the region of about 20, 30, 40 pages from various agencies talking about the Hill case, and also in one case, or one document talking about how something strange was picked up on the radar scope, near one of the local Air Force base where the craft was seen. So, you know, you've got a lot of things like this where agencies were putting together documentation in the early 60s, you know, and the Hill case is a perfect example. Someone in government had already kind of, you know, red flagged this, so to speak, and realized that, hey, you know, we need to keep an eye on this and start, you know, sort of documenting these events, and particularly the ones who are writing books on their experiences and lecturing, you know, maybe we can talk to some of them. But as I said, you know, there's no way they could go around the country and speak to every thousands of abductees, because the story would come tumbling out. But you don't need to interview everybody to understand what the trend is. You know, you can actually probably do that in just a couple of dozen cases, you know.
Well, now, I mean, they don't overtly interview people, but if they realize somebody through either a message they put out there or something, they realize somebody's an abductee, or maybe they're able to track or monitor UFOs, then they're covertly monitoring alien abductees too.
Yeah, and I think this sort of brings you to another aspect where, you know, we've sort of generically said, well, the government's doing this or the government's doing that. But what I've found is that for the most part, it's been like, for example, Air Force Intelligence, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. They've been significantly involved. Then you have this other aspect of what are known as like MILABs or MILABs, like military abductions, which seem to be far more sort of strenuous and stressful and sort of in your face. Now, a lot of the case I talked about, the military people, particularly from Air Force Intelligence, you know, it was actually quite a very polite interview. You know, like I said earlier, can we speak to you? You know, we'd prefer you wouldn't say anything, but could you share your story with us, and can we ask some questions? With these military abductions, it really is like you've got people being slammed up against the wall or whatever and told, you know, you ever talk about this, you know, you'll be killed. Or, you know, if you talk about this, you know, we can do things to you. And all we want to know is what happened. We want all the information, and don't ever talk about it again. And then you have the third side of it, is where you have the abductees being followed by and threatened by the Men in Black. And by the Men in Black, I don't mean, you know, the movie versions, you know, Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. I mean these where people have said these Men in Black don't even look human. You know, they're sort of skinny and pale, and they're this sort of skin that looks like plastic, and, you know, they've got these fedora hats and wraparound sunglasses, and they kind of look like, the well-dressed Walking Dead kind of thing, And so you've got at least 2 or 3 categories of different agencies monitoring the abductees, and one of the MIB may not even be human. So, it's almost as if there are competing agencies trying to figure out what's going on with the abductions, or, going out of their way to try and silence people.
Or some other, or it's the aliens back up to covering them up. I mean, the men in black that don't seem to be human, like there's some, I remember one part in the book, they were like, they do weird things, like they were like interested or obsessed with this person's space heater, I think it was, you mentioned in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Just weird things they don't understand, or they do weird things, or they don't look right. There's a classic, have you seen the classic video footage of the Men in Black? It was in a hotel lobby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you've seen that. It's like they're odd in appearance and dress, and even that video that's blurry and all that stuff, if that's real, they look pretty odd. You'd think they'd stick out, but they somehow have these experiences with people and threatening, and then disappear. It makes me feel like they're some kind of interdimensional, like, I don't know, time cops or something. I don't know. There's something odd about what's going on with that phenomenon. The other aspect about me monitoring is the helicopters, which you bring up quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, well, that's one of the other important parts, is the black helicopter phenomenon, where a lot of abductees have reported that after an abduction experience, even if they've had like a lifetime of them, let's say they had one next week, and then 2 days later, this black helicopter comes hovering over the house, I mean, sort of perilously low, sort of almost rattling the windows. Yeah. And it seems to be done for no particular reason other than just to intimidate people. It's not like, for the most part, people have said, oh, yeah, a door opens and some guy's got like a camera, and taking pictures. It's actually not like that. People have said it just seems to, they just want their presence to be known. And I think, that has to be more of like an intimidation thing. Hey, we know who you are, where you live.
It works.
And we just... Yeah, it does. I mean, it's kind of like some people have said, their mail's been tampered with, people in the UFO field. Well, it's not that difficult to open an envelope and reseal it. But in many of these cases, the envelopes were torn open and resealed with tape, clearly again, so it becomes obvious. That
they don't need to do that anymore. They just look at the real mail, which is your phone. They got all the access they want now. Your Alexa, your phone. They monitor us completely now. And with 5G, they're saying they'd be able to use that to look inside your home and see everything you're doing. It'll be the complete monitoring tool. They can find out what all the alien abductees are up to.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like people have said to me, do you think we're all going to one day have implants tracking us in our arms?
Oh, I love that part in your book.
And I'm like, well, the government will never need to put tracking devices in us, because we've all got one in our pocket already.
It's the preemptive to the chip. It really is. A smartphone is. And I'm guilty. Yeah. I use one. I know. But it is the preemptive to the chip. The reason I bring up the black helicopter thing, I really was like, I've been so looking forward to having you on. We're going to come up to commercial break here soon. But when I was on the phone one night with my friend, I was telling you about Terry Lovelace, who's an abductee, and we were talking about stuff I'm not going to say on the show. I got off the phone with him, and it was like, literally, Nick, like 30 minutes after I got off the phone with him, I'm like, suddenly the house starts to shake. It wasn't like a soul buildup. It was just like, and my wife's like, what is that? What is going on? I'm like, I don't know. And we're standing there, and we're looking all over the house, like looking out the windows, like, what is that noise? It's like 5 minutes before I finally had enough. I open up my back door, and as soon as I opened my back door, I could hear it. As soon as that was a helicopter, and it was like so low. It went right over the tree line. All I could make out was the red blinking lights, but it was so low. I've never seen a helicopter that low over my house and fly over. And it was like a month later, Terry, we correspond by email, mentioned that around that time we were on the phone that he was having all these helicopters around his house and another family member's house. And it was at the same time I had that phone call. My wife, when I told her that, she was like, "We need a P.O. box. You're doing that show." It freaked her out. So the intimidation's real.
Oh yeah, it gets people worried, and I think that's the point. It's but like I said, with phones, I mean, whether you've got an iPhone or you've just got another type of smartphone, I mean, just about anything you do, you know, if you get a couple of cinema tickets online, you know, or a pizza, you know, they know what movie you're watching and even what your favorite pizza is, you know.
Oh, no, they listen. They totally listen with your phone. I proved this. It was a few weeks ago. I talked about this on the show. Something I never looked up on my phone ever. My wife was talking about home food delivery services. Next day, even though I never looked it up on my phone, next day, what do I get in my Facebook feed? Home food delivery services popping up. You know, the only way is if that phone was listening. You know.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, it's like anything that's any sort of smart device today, you know, can be used against people. I mean, the technology, in theory, is actually very good, you know, but it's what it's used for. I mean, I don't believe that the average, I know this is getting more into a bit of politics, but I don't believe the average person needs to be watched. You know what I mean? We're not, you know, the vast majority of the population is not a threat to anybody. 99% of the people who will go through airport security, there's no real reason to make them take their shoes off, you know.
Well, more than that, just like fondle you, you know, basically.
But the thing is, you know, it's like there is always, you know, somebody, a bad person out there. And it's kind of the same thing with the technology, is that for the most part, it can be used for really positive ways. But on the other hand, you know, there's always somebody who wants to use that technology as a means just to watch us for whatever reason, you know. I mean, I'd be very surprised if it actually isn't far worse than we're led to know, you know, in terms of the surveillance. And
Oh, yeah. I think it's pretty bad, and I think Apple's in on it, and not just surveillance from our government people. You got to remember, like for Apple, for when I have Apple, but at the same time, I know that they're ponying up to China and getting real comfortable with China and real comfortable giving them our information. So it's not just our government we should be worried about spying on us. It's other governments spying on us too. And I always default to just not trusting my government, and they shouldn't have no business to be spying in on me. So it's a scary thought. My thing, what I got when I had this helicopter experience is like, I was just on the phone like 30 minutes ago. If this is somehow connected, where did they fly from? How did they have that fast a response? I get to the idea again, is like, is it really a helicopter? Is it something else disguised as a helicopter? That's a whole other subject on that. We're going to go.
I mean, it's also, you know, you've got like Echo Spot, Echo Dot. I mean, somebody said to a friend of mine, she said, you know, do you have them? I said, oh, no, I don't have them in my apartment.
Oh, I bet not.
Everybody and his brother listening in. No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazon just admitted that they have like 150,000 employees that listen to your Amazon Echo recordings.
And that's a creepy thought. We'll leave the audience with that. We're going to go to commercial break. When we get back, we'll have our guest, Nick Redfern. We'll also open up the phone lines. You can call in and ask him questions. I'll give out those phone lines when we get back from the commercial break. Don't forget, guys, go check us out on our Patreon page. There's an exclusive podcast on there right now about time slips and dimensional shifts. You get access to that if you subscribe for $2 a month. Go help out the show by doing that. Well, your donations help us fuel out to get us out on the internet radio. We're going to soon be on podcast world, but your donations help get us there. All right, guys, we'll be back after this short commercial break.
Transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
In space. No one can hear you scream.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine and soon, paranationmag.com.
Knights of the road, here's your stallion. The car for freedom. The car for hot excitement. The car for a man who is alone against the elements.
The Waibatsu Thunder.
The pride is back. It's the power of a compact.
Looks small, but it's so big.
Fuel injected.
Inject me.
My Batsu Thunder. On the toll road of life, you have to pay to prove you can. Live the emotion of an individual.
Thunder.
The awesome power of nature distilled into one vehicle. Because after you get struck by lightning, there's thunder.
The Waibatsu Thunder.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it, but to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all, but he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now, Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the dreamscape.
This is an APAC studio presentation.
Hey kids, tired of running away from home? Then getting lost and wrapping your big wheel around a cow? Then having no one to turn to other than that weirdo in the van with the dark tinted windows? Or his friend, your creepy Uncle John? Well, worry no more with new OnStar for Kids. Now you can run away in style with an OnStar for Kids kit installed in your big wheel, tricycle, or cute little smart car. Yes, just in time for Christmas, OnStar for Kids. So the next time you're on your way to Granny's house, or Weekend Dad's pathetic little bachelor pad, and you run over a homeless person in your toboggan, OnStar for Kids will clean up the mess, hide the hobo body, and get you there in time for nappies.
This is OnStar. Do you need someone to kiss your boo-boo?
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
Edgar Allan Poe wrote Spirits of the Dead with a pen dipped in warm blood. You will see the ultimate in terror with this important all-star cast. Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda in Edgar Allan Poe's Spirits of the Dead. Only Poe's demented genius could bring to the screen such horror and evil. Spirits of the Dead stars Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda. Directed by three masters of the cinema, Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. Spirits of the Dead is an adventure in terror beyond your wildest nightmares. Spirits of the Dead in color is rated R.
You said before you were waiting for a sign. What sign are you waiting for?
Gozer the Traveler. He will come in one of the pre-chosen forms. During the rectification of the Valdrani, the Traveler came as a large and moving Tor. Then, during the third reconciliation of the last of the McKettrick supplicants, they chose a new form for him, that of a giant slore. Many Shubs and Zools knew what it was to be roasted in the depths of the slore that day, I can tell you.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Nick Redfern. We're talking about his latest book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. And there's a lot I think they don't want you to know. We have so much to get into tonight. not only the black helicopter thing we've been talking about, but cattle mutilations. What's their connection to this? Also, we have the Mothman kind of conspiracy going on in the Chicagoland area. He brings that up in the book. I find extremely interesting. But you might have something you want to ask us about tonight, or you've had your own experiences. You can call in. There's 2 lines tonight. The other 2 are down, but the 2 lines to call in on are 219-230-4444, or you can call in on Skype ID OOJBland00. Those are the 2 lines. When you call in, you'll hear us talking. Just wait till we call on you, and then you can ask your question. But let's go ahead and get back to our guest. You still there with me, Nick?
Yeah. Hey, Jason.
So, we were talking about the black helicopters. The other thing, somehow those black helicopters, you had a lot of files of the government and people looking into the helicopters, but cattle mutilations, too.
Yeah, this is one of the interesting things about the whole black helicopter phenomenon, is that it doesn't just revolve around alien abductions. There have been a lot of reports. And for people who are interested, if you go to the FBI's website I mentioned earlier, the Vault, click on the unexplained phenomenon, and then scroll down to where it says animal mutilation. The FBI have declassified about 150 pages from their files on animal mutilations, predominantly cattle mutilations. And many of those reports talk about black helicopters having been seen in the direct area where the mutilations occurred. But as you mentioned before the break, there's some really weird cases where witnesses have said these black helicopters have sort of transformed into like a ball of light or into like a flying saucer, almost as if they were sort of alien craft, but sort of stealthily able to project an image that actually isn't the real way they look, as if almost like a highly advanced type of camouflage. Those kind of cases, I have to admit, they are in the minority, but I mean, arguably, if they are the government's helicopters, there shouldn't be any cases of helicopters morphing into a ball of light or into a flying saucer or just vanishing, as some people have said. Or flying in complete silence, So there is something really weird about at least some of the black helicopters, There's no doubt in some cases, many cases, they are real helicopters, but this minority of cases where they don't even seem real in terms of being a helicopter, those are really baffling,
Well, I was baffled by my experience. I mean, I don't know if it was something that could have was a UFO or anything like that. It seemed like a real helicopter, but it was extremely low over my house. And why it hung out above my house, I don't know. It was a really weird experience. I've seen a UFO, but when I was like a teenager, this was right up there with weird, just because I don't know why it hung out over my house for 5 minutes right after I got off the phone with an alien abductee, who then tells me later that he's having this kind of issue. So it was weird, and just how quickly they could respond if they were somehow listening in. For some reason, they felt they needed to intimidate me. I don't know why. They would have 30 minutes to get there. Well,
because you got a radio show,
Yeah, I'm not a big show. Go buzz George Norrie's house. It's like they got an issue, but it just was a really weird experience. But so these cases, like we talked about the cattle mutilations, and you get a little bit into, because then with the cattle mutilations, places like Dulce, and the connection to that, and alien bases. Now, some of these abductees claimed to have been taken to somewhere like Dulce before. I thought that was really interesting, that people have memories of going down there, besides the stories of people who worked there or whatever, but the people actually were taken and gone down into some kind of underground military base, maybe Dulce.
Well, yeah, this is interesting because it sort of, again, kind of shows a trend. Now, most of, if not all the people I've interviewed who said that they were approached by military intelligence, who asked them in quite a polite way, can you tell us about your experiences? That was based around people who'd had abduction encounters and nothing more. But the ones who claimed to have been taken to like underground facilities where there were aliens and humans allegedly working together, this kind of thing, all the people I spoke to who had been visited weren't visited by those kind of military intelligence people. They were visited by the more sort of dangerous military abduction guys, the MILABs as they call them. And they were the ones who were, you know, really threatening and warning people not to talk about these issues related to underground bases and all this kind of stuff. So it's like the ones who are just looking into the abduction stories are far more just a regular conversation, but keep it quiet. But when they've had experiences underground, it's like they're threatened and intimidated and slammed against the wall, quite literally in a couple of cases, not to talk about that. So, again, it sort of suggests there are two different aspects and two different agencies or programs that are looking at things from different perspectives, and it seems that the underground aspect is the one that really kind of concerns them.
Well, it sounds like that's the one they're not messing around with. I mean, look at I totally lost the name of the one person who came out. Totally lost the name. The guy who got in the shootout in Dulce Base. I'm totally lost the name at the moment.
I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot like that where people have been into these underground installations and claim to have seen aliens and humans there and people in like cylinders and, being almost, as if we're being sort of used as lab rats and just sort of very kind of nightmarish scenarios, where these people supposedly don't come out, Now, to what extent that's all true, I mean, that's a big question, but there's no shortage of accounts along those lines. And as I said, this seems to be the one aspect of the abduction phenomenon more than anything else that somebody in the official world, wants this to sort of be played down or just talked about.
Still looking to try to figure out that name, but he, I've seen the supposed suicide pictures of it, the autopsy pictures, and I'm like, there's no way this guy killed himself, but it was ruled a suicide, and I mean, maybe, but I don't know how somebody strangulates himself with their catheter tube.
You mean Phil Schneider?
Phil Schneider. I knew it was Phil. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to me, that seems like they're not playing around with this information, if that's the case, or whoever it is trying to keep it secret when it comes to the underground bases. And some of those stories that come out of them are some of the most horrific, incredible, like the vats of human body parts and the aliens need to feed upon us. It makes you wonder what the whole cat mutilation. Are they going out for a late night dinner and picking up some rectal core of some cow out there? I mean. Well,
that is one of the theories. That in some respects that the Greys sort of feed on us. Not necessarily literally eat us, but there is this theory that. Sort of like living almost like in a life energy or a life force, that kind of thing. That's sort of one of the more disturbing ideas. Kind of like the Matrix movies, where we're all creating electricity for the machines. We think we're living in this normal world, but we're just like in, all these pods, and we're living in a kind of a farm, being farmed.
That's one of the harvesting souls, basically.
Yeah, that's the theory. Because a number of people who've had abduction experiences have said they felt as if when they were on the UFO, like their soul was being ripped out of their body, and they were having like out-of-body experiences. When you have these people in the hospital and they die, and the doctors bring them back, but in that couple of minutes they see, they're floating, looking down at the body. There's a lot of stories like that in abductions, and this angle was actually looked at by the government, and this theory of sort of the Greys, so to speak, living on the human life force, the human energy or the soul, in the same way that in the Matrix movies, they're living on electricity created by the human body. But it's kind of like a creepily similar scenario in many ways.
There's a lot of people that have gone kind of down that rabbit hole. David Icke, really kind of went with that they've, the Matrix idea and them feeding on our energy. The idea of Whitley Strieber kind of put this out there, and John Lear back in the day, that they're kind of harvesting our souls. The moon is a big soul capacitor. Those things have always fascinated me and frightened me deeply.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, if it's true, it is frightening if we are just a farm, and we don't see the bigger picture. Unfortunately, it's the same with animals, like cows and pigs. They don't see the full picture. They spend the rest of all their lives in the field eating grass or whatever until, they go off to the slaughterhouse. But, I mean, at the end of the day, we shouldn't find it surprising, really, because we do that to huge numbers of animals every day. So why shouldn't something more superior than us be doing it to us,
Well, I mean, there's some people that claim the aliens are demons. That's a whole thing out there.
I actually wrote a book about that about a decade ago called Final Events, which was actually about a small think tank type group within the government that actually does believe, this whole phenomenon is not extraterrestrial. They concluded, from their perspective, not mine, but from their perspective, they conclude that the phenomenon is literally demonic, that the Greys are sort of like demonic entities rather than extraterrestrials.
Well, when you talk about them harvesting souls, it gives them some credit, It's just semantics, It could be just semantics in a way. They see it as demons, we see it as aliens, but it doesn't matter the difference. What the difference is, because they're doing the same thing. They're harvesting our souls for some purpose. What frightened me about that concept was do you go to the light at the end of the tunnel? Or are there aliens waiting for you there? That's the question. And the ideas of heaven and hell, how these could come about. Also, the question is, with the alien abduction thing, did it really just start in the 1940s, or do you think it goes back way further than that?
Oh, no, it goes way back. I mean, if you look, for example, into, if you go back to England in the Middle Ages, or the 14 and 1500s, when there was a big belief in fairies. Now, when I talk about fairies, I'm not talking about little characters you see on the Christmas tree or Christmas card, Tinkerbell, nothing like that. If you go back and read the original stories and legends of fairies, they were like small, 3 foot tall sort of creepy characters that would come out at night, and very often they would steal children, and people would notice them first, not by their presence, but by these, what were known as fairy lights, these flickering lights, which you could apply, as a UFO. And in some cases, men were kidnapped and taken to the fairy kingdom. There's dozens of stories like that, and they had to have sex with the alien queen because their race was dying. And when the man would be taken back to our world, like the 3 days had gone by instead of 2 hours. So you've got the missing time component. So now you can, that's not sort of just theoretical. Those stories, you can find them going back sort of 500 years. And the parallels between abduction stories today are so close as to be almost identical. Now, as I said, I would stress I don't believe in literal fairies.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if some of the legends of fairies and goblins taking children and people in the middle of the night and so on and having missing time, I wouldn't be surprised if some of those old legends were based on something almost identical to what's going on today.
I was thinking about that today when I was looking at a picture of the Notre Dame Cathedral and the gargoyles on there, and thinking about Mothman. Where did gargoyles come from? And the similarities between that and what people see when they see Mothman in a way, too. They might have been trying to explain something interdimensional from back in the day.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of these, sort of slightly off topic, but when you talk about Mothman and, some of these crypto creatures like, Bigfoot and lake monsters and things like this, in many cases, they actually don't come across like regular animals. You know, they're too elusive. We never catch them.
There's no body.
Sometimes they're seen in the same areas and locations and times as UFO activities happened. There have been people who claim to have seen Bigfoot sort of surrounded by these strange flickering lights, and then it literally dematerializes in front of them. So, you know, I do think, you know, we can make a case that some of these cryptozoological creatures aren't just regular animals that science hasn't found yet, but they are something much weirder. But a lot of cryptozoologists don't like that angle. They just want it to be, you know, they just want Bigfoot to be
a physical creature,
a North American ape, and nothing else, you know. But my view is, well, too bad. You know, some of the evidence points in a really weird direction. And, you know, for me, I don't understand why people are hostile to the alternative theories. I mean, we're all looking for the answers to what Bigfoot is. And if it turns out to be a giant ape, or it turns out to be some sort of interdimensional creature, well, whatever the answer is, as long as we get the answer, that's the important thing, you know.
Yeah, to me, it's a lot more possible in my mind of these things being interdimensional, just because of the fact of no bodies being found. And not just Bigfoot. I mean, you look at these other strange creatures, I mean, like Mothman and Dogman and these other creatures, that, you know, what could be slipping into our reality? You know, how thin is that veil where these scenes are slipping in and out, and for what purpose? And, you know, maybe it is a little off topic, but it is in your book. You bring up the whole what's been going on in the Chicagoland area with Mothman and the apocalyptic dreams, similar to those who've been abducted and had apocalyptic dreams, but apocalyptic dreams about Chicago. And we've talked about that on the show several times, and because I live not far from there. How do you think that all ties in to what's going on with the abduction and UFO phenomenon?
Well, yeah, this is an interesting one, and I wouldn't have included it in the book were it not for the fact that a couple of people came forward who'd had prophetic dreams of like nuclear destruction, particularly in and around the Chicago area. And this was in early 2017 onwards. And some of these people who had the dreams were also abductees. Now, you probably remember, if you're not, you know, you live not too far from there,
right,
but just a few years ago, you know, just after President Trump was elected, there was all this talk about how North Korea might have a nuclear weapon that could reach Chicago. You remember that?
Yeah.
And, well, it was in that period, 2017, that a lot of people in and around the Chicago area started to have, like, nightmarish dreams of the city just vaporized, you know, and just millions dead in like a millisecond. And in the same time frame, you had people having identical dreams all around the world. All around the country.
Yeah.
For example, just to sort of jump forward, I wrote several articles about this and got a huge amount of feedback. And many of the stories are actually in the book, where there's one story from Lubbock where this guy saw this huge mushroom cloud on the one part of the horizon, and then suddenly there was another one, you know, looked like to be 80 miles, 100 miles away in the other direction. And also several new people came forward who'd seen in a dream, you know, like, again, the city being destroyed. And just the fact that, you know, so much was focused on Chicago had a lot of people intrigued and worried as well at the same time. And in this same time frame, you had people claiming to have seen this strange winged humanoid creature, again, in and around the Chicago area, not unlike the Mothman of the 1960s. Now, it's important to note when the Mothman was seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the 60s, it all culminated with the collapse of the town's Silver Bridge, and 46 people drowned when the bridge fell into the river. So in other words, people have associated Mothman with like a looming disaster. You know, it appears when disasters are going to happen. So then if you bring that back to 2017, you've got all these people having these dreams and nightmares of nuclear war, and then suddenly there are these sightings of this creature which are associated with disaster. then you can really understand why people put various pieces together. But the reason why I included this in the book was because several abductees a lot of abductees have sort of nightmares of, future disasters, nuclear war, and the collapse of the ecosystem and things like that. There's nothing new about that. Excuse me. But several of the people who read those articles, which I did for Mysterious Universe, I think it was like 3 articles altogether, several of the people who came forward were abductees who said that in that period of 2017 that they had been approached by, again, military people and also by government people involved in, like, homeland security type situations. Yeah. And in those cases, there was no threats, there was no, intimidation. It was people just like us, everyday people, who have a job to do, and they were concerned about all these nightmares and dreams and the Mothman sightings. And one sort of amusing situation, one of the guys apparently told one of the interviewees, one of the girls I interviewed, that they didn't know anything about Mothman. They were like, what the hell's a Mothman, and why have we got to research this, because it was totally off the wall for them. But somebody in the official world had ordered them to
take an
basically
interest.
to speak, to figure it out and see what was going on. And in those cases, the questions were, well, what was the dream about, or what were the dreams about, and what was the scenario, and which cities did you dream about? And the other thing that came up on several occasions was the issue of in the dreams or the nightmares that several of the people had. They said that somehow the Russians managed to launch an attack before we were able to fight back, and the big question was, how could they do that when we've got all this technology so we could fire back at the same time and at least destroy them? And this whole issue came up of EMP technology, right. Electromagnetic pulse phenomena, where basically electromagnetic pulse weapon can essentially just wipe out all electrical systems over a huge area. And if you target it, strategically, you could literally sort of wipe out, the electrical systems across hundreds and hundreds of miles, and in a worse scenario, even more than that. And many people sort of brought this up in these dreams and these nightmares, the idea that before the war began, that the U.S. electrical grid was knocked out. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was no way to fight back, or at least launch, a response. And it seemed that EMP angle, a couple of the people I interviewed said the EMP aspect of all this was the one that really sort of made their eyes just go wide. And one of them concluded, granted there wasn't any proof of this, but she said she felt that when she brought up the EMP aspect with him, that the guy really looked shocked, and she said it was as if he'd heard that before. It wasn't the first time he'd heard that, and she thought that that was something that someone else must have told them. And when she told him about the EMP thing, he was like, oh my God, somebody else has heard this or dreamed about this. And so, and as far as I know, as far as I know, I didn't get any more responses apart from that handful that I did in 2017. And maybe it's still being looked at, maybe it's not, I don't know. But all I can say for sure, it was in 2017 when you had this cluster of nightmares, a cluster of Mothman sightings, and a cluster of also just general people, not abductees as well, but also just general people having nightmares about Chicago being destroyed. That was when all of this stuff was going down, with certain people being visited and say, hey, sorry to bother you, but can we come in and talk to you about these nightmares? And the reason why they picked up on several people was not because they were sort of being, specifically under surveillance. What it was, a couple of the abductees had Facebook pages,
right.
and they actually put their stories on Facebook saying, hey, last night I had this nightmare about a nuclear war and EMP weapons. And so they did the easy thing. They scoured Facebook.
Right.
And tracked the people down and went to see them. It really was that simple.
Well, you wonder if the government takes notice of these kind of trends, because after 9/11, the FBI had to investigate a number of cases of children, especially children, who predicted 9/11. They had to investigate it. Did these people have some kind of pre-knowledge of 9/11? I think there's a whole book on that subject out there, actually. Makes you wonder if they they have some kind of task force that looks for some kind of consciousness trend or shift, or people posting dreams about apocalyptic things happening, try to get ahead of the game. I don't know. I have that kind of imagination. Just wonders, because the one story when the girl, she's being interviewed by a guy from Department of Homeland Security. I mean, he's asking, what city, what kind of attack? Like you said, they're trying to get seems like specifics, really specific of what's going on. Like they have an interest to maybe stop it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, it could be one of several things. I mean, there are a lot of people who, in the abduction arena, where they've had apocalyptic dreams in the 70s and 80s, and they were told, these wars are going to be imminent, and it didn't happen. Maybe some people have suggested that maybe this is done and to try and determine how human emotions work. So how do they do that? Well, they plunge us into terrifying states. What could be worse than a nuclear war? And then they watch our reactions and see how, physically and mentally, psychologically, we respond to these things. It could be trying to understand our emotional states, and they do that by plunging us into these states. So in a best-case scenario, it's something like that. It's not prophetic dreams of something that's imminent. It's sort of manipulation on the part of the Greys to see how we react to that possibility, So.
Or if they feed on our energy, it's just a way for them to get a kick out of us from our emotional reaction.
Well, that's right. I mean, what's the best way to get someone, their energy level,
the end of the world,
really sort of fired up, is to show them images of the end of the world, or the end of civilization. It's kind of like the ultimate fix, just with a kick, with a boost,
It's a scary thought. I mean, I'd rather that be the case, though, than them just getting their kicks, than there's actually some apocalyptic scenario waiting for us.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's a lot of people that have had visions of this over the years, and from the aliens, and nothing's happened. The people are having visions like the contactees and the abductees. Saw war with Russia and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. They were definitely manipulating a fear everybody already subconsciously had.
I guess the only thing that makes this one in 2017 with Chicago, the only thing that makes that stand out and be a bit different is the concentration on Chicago.
Yeah, that's what concerned me.
The Mothman site, like the concentration of the sightings of the Mothman creatures and of all the dreams of nuclear nightmares, all in one particular time frame. That is actually fairly unique in terms of the other situations.
It's still happening, though. I just had a story, Nick, 2 weeks ago, I think, or maybe it was last week, of another sighting. This one was a little different, but it was near the area. I don't have the article here with me, but do you remember, instead of the red eyes this time, it had green eyes. And I think it was on Phantoms and Monsters. I believe that's where I got the story. But it seems like these people are still seeing something in Chicago. It definitely was 2017. Seemed to be, we had a lot of those stories, but something's still going on. And I've always wondered, if this is. I named the show Paranormal Soup because I believe all these things are connected in some way. How the aliens with their message of the end of the world, the Mothman with being some kind of predictor of some tragedy, again, that could be an interdimensional entity that's feeding off the fear of people. Might amp up a whole city and be feeding off of that, like some big smorgasbord.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we're still kind of struggling, and I think that's what leads me to believe that the government's struggling as well. I mean, they're not bad, evil guys. You know, they're like us. You know, they've got families. They've got their favorite TV shows. But they're in a situation where they have a really weird job, which, for the most part, they cannot talk about it. And, you know, if you think about it, it would be a really difficult place to be in. You know, they're not sort of like, like some old black and white movie from, like, the 1920s where you've got the villain, you know, twiddling his moustache and, got the girl laid out and tied up on the railroad track, you know, like some old villain or whatever. You know, it's not like, they're not like that, you know, they're not evil people. They're just caught in a job, which is a really awkward situation when you cannot tell your family or anybody that there's this awful secret that we're trying to figure out and we don't know what it is. And, you know, they're cooking outside on a Saturday afternoon with the family and the friends when in the back of the mind all the time is what's going on and when's it going to happen, you know. So, it must be difficult for them, you know.
Or the implications of everything. I mean, even Bob Lazar, I think, is where they got the idea of the containers. They read something that we were just containers, that they were after our souls. If you knew that, if you worked, that was Art Bell's infamous John Lear test he would do. He'd lay out all the whole thing to the person and would you reveal that, because it would just destroy society to know that. Imagine holding that kind of secret and not be able to tell anybody. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. Well, the big irony is, let's say tomorrow everybody, all the major people in ufology is sort of, taken somewhere and told the truth. It may well be the situation where 99% of them, when it's explained to them, exactly what's going on. The big irony could be that most of them will say, wow, okay, we won't say anything because it is too much. That could actually happen. We're all looking for answers, but if we knew what the answers were, a lot of people might say, oh God, we just cannot tell the world,
Yeah. Tell them, you might not want to go to the light at the end of the tunnel. That was the frightening concept of it all. But getting that too, another frightening concept that has to be the government is the alien implant phenomenon with these objects being put inside of people. What can they do? There's one really cool experience or story that you put in the book about a boy who's taken and showed visions of the end of the world and all that, and then government operatives later on take him in a van and kind of interrogate him about this experience and relay some information. I remember about I think like a school shooting or something like that, that implant or somebody who had an implant in them was able to be controlled to do something like that.
Yeah, I think they were talking about that more like, a theoretical scenario.
Yeah.
Of what, they were worried about what the
implants could do.
Yeah, I mean, not that they had proof of it, that actually happened, but, they were looking at, are people being implanted, to turn them into like...
a sleeper cell.
Like, a hypnotized assassin or somebody who... their mind would just be controlled for whatever purpose. And they came up with various different scenarios. But what this demonstrates is that, government agencies are concerned by this implant angle, whatever the truth of the implants is, because it's a significant part of the abduction phenomenon. It's easy to understand why they would be looking into that. And you're right. What one of the guys said was something along the lines of, well, they could be creating like an entire sort of underworld of sort of Manchurian candidates, which could be switched on at any moment for whatever purpose, So clearly they've been looking at various scenarios and theories, and as you said, with things like that, very, very controversial theories they were coming up with to try and figure out why people are being, monitored via these implants. I mean, we mentioned about phones earlier. Well, I don't see any reason in the foreseeable future as to why we should now ever be implanted. If the iPhone had never been implanted, smartphones had never been implanted, I could see how someday somebody might try and justify it. But when every bit of aspect of your life is now on your phone, there's no need to do any of that. But it seems that, the aliens, whatever they are, they do seem to have a reliance on implants rather than something else. But again, it's such a bizarre and sinister. It's probably one of the most sinister aspects of it. You think about it, that people are being kidnapped and implanted with devices that we don't understand why it's being done or what they even are. That is clearly something I think that any government would at least take, some sort of interest in it.
They'd have to be worried, like, have anybody in our echelon in the top secret programs been abducted and implanted and are now spies for the aliens?
Yeah.
They'd have
you
to
can
be
see how
worried.
that paranoia would just develop and spread,
Well, I remember in the story too, like one of these people that captured the boy, like ran something across him, like to see if he had been implanted. I thought that was interesting.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was clear that, they have these patterns, if you like, that they do immediately with the MILAB guys, where, they figure out if they've got an implant inside them, they threaten them, they warn them. They're obviously aware in many cases of the activities of the abductee themselves. They've been keeping watch on them. They have a far more aggressive approach to all this than some of the other groups. And, maybe that's the stress of having to hide the whole situation. Who knows?
And then the question has to come up too, with the MyLab thing is, they talk about the secret space force. Was it Gary McKinnon that hacked the NASA computers? Or was it? I think that was his name, and found out information that we had a secret space force out there.
Yeah, that's sort of another thing that's really sort of taken off in the last few years.
Yeah.
The idea of the idea that NASA is a legitimate agency sending satellites up and things, but at the same time the theory is that another arm of government or even an entirely separate organization funded by who knows what has its own space program. In other words, it's not like NASA is hiding its own secret space program. I think what NASA's got is what we're seeing.
Right.
But the theory is, that there is like going alongside NASA, there's like a deeply hidden space program that may have, who knows, gone back to the moon or wherever. That scenario is sort of really growing within not just ufology, but sort of, just a field of conspiracy research as well.
It was like the whole plot premise to X-Files when it returned, basically.
Yeah.
And Mulder's big, like, revelation, that it's been the government the whole time. Like, I don't totally believe that, but I do think it's a big possibility. If we have alien technology, if we have ships of our own, is it possible we are also experimenting on our citizens with that? We do have somebody on the phone line. I want to take this phone call here. We got a 405 area code. Who do we got on the phone?
Hey, it's Tyler.
Hey, Tyler. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I thought this would be a good time to call in because I got a lot of service members, in my family and stuff, and you sit around GIs long enough, they share some stories with you. And you kind of, back when the Cold War ended, you had all these military bases with empty silos. Now they got supposed to have empty silos, and also in this stretch of area where I live, there's other inside bases, and like the GI, some of these GIs will tell me like They know guys that would work at these bases for like a year, maybe 3 years max. And as soon as they know too much, they let them go and they disappear. They go somewhere else or retire or whatever. You know, so like one of my questions to them, I was like, do you think, you know, is it possible that they do Area 51 styles? Like, you know, do they got other test stuff like Area 51 does?
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying, yeah. They were saying there's some secret stuff that, you know, there's other agencies for the space force, you know. You know, who knows what the technology we have built that we don't even know that, you know, we're exploring the space. How far are we going? You know, they're finding these wormholes.
Well, a good example of that is like back in 1988, when the Air Force rolled out the stealth fighter and the stealth bomber for the first time, like these huge, well, the bomber being the huge black triangular shaped thing, and the fighter a much smaller black triangular craft. That was the 1988, but they'd actually been tested as far back as 1975. So for 13 years, the technology was in place, but the public didn't know anything about it. So I don't see why it could be the same today. You know, the technology could be 15, 20 years ahead of us now, but we're not going to see it, you know, for another 15, 20, 30 years. And, you know, and that was a perfect example back in the 80s. So why should it be any different now? So any number of secret bases, you know, could be working on things that we just won't see for a long, long time.
I mean, like like I was just saying, you got all these empty nuclear silos all stretched out, because I'm literally stretched out between 4 different major bases besides Air Force. You know, and especially the one that I'm closest to, I see A-1 bombers. I'll see jet fighters just coming out and just rockets. So, I mean, it's so cool to watch some of the airplanes that just go flying in. You wonder what they're really doing.
Well, you got to wonder too.
Testing, but
Tyler too, not just other, you know, the bases. They talk about a whole underground network where they have tunnels that could fit 4 or 5 of those bombers in a row through them. You know, huge underground facilities. So, you know, they could be carting all kinds of different materials and exotic technology right under our feet.
I mean, they got like the C-17s, like they do things. They do this maneuver. It's called round the flagpole. It's just pretty much practicing going around in a loop and then landing as fast as you can and going. You know what I'm saying? You do drop and go, boom, and then I'd be seeing them flying way past where the base is at, and I'm just assuming all in these valleys that's where one of the bases at, but I'm not touching that groundwork or anything. But you know, it's just cool watching how this all going down, and your mind's just wondering, what's really out here?
Well, thanks, Tyler, for calling in.
Yeah, buddy. Thank you so much for letting me call in, and you all have a good night.
You too, bud.
You too.
Later.
I always say, what's a better place to hide something than in plain view?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, who knows what kind of installations they have throughout the world, not just here, and what kind of technology they can be hiding. I mean, again, I hate to go back to Bob Lazar, but the way he made it sounds like we barely we didn't have the fuel or anything. I've always wondered, somebody's case like Bob Lazar was a show put on by our government to him to go public, so enemies like Russia or China would think we weren't as far along as we might be with this technology.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people do think that. I don't believe. The one thing I don't believe is that Lazar was a hoaxer. I don't think he was a hoaxer at all. And I think there's one or two, well, actually there's several scenarios. I think the main two is that it happened as he said it happened, or somebody wanted the story to be put out there, possibly to freak out the Russians or the Chinese, and they would use like a patsy. And so they brought him in on board and showed him stuff that wasn't actually real, showed him documents about aliens that really weren't real, and that it was done as a means to, just, as I said, freak the other side, so to speak. And I could well understand why that could be done as a means to make it look like, that, yes, we've got alien technology. And maybe we do. But even if we don't, just the idea of putting the thought into the minds of the Russians that we've got alien technology, that in itself would be enough to sort of, put the windham up, so to speak. So, it's. I think that issue of mind games is actually one of the most important ones. But a lot of people in ufology ignore it or just don't even recognize the significance of it. They're just interested in the cases and sightings, which obviously is the main part. But I think if people realized how, on both sides, there have been mind games and it's all revolved around UFOs, I think people would then realize, well, how much of this data can we trust and how much is real and how much is created during the Cold War, to have the Russians in a panic or whatever.
Well, to me, the Cold War never ended. It's still me. We're still there, and there's still these mind games, I think, going on between our country and theirs, and the internet is definitely helping with that. But that's one thing I've always wondered about the Bob Lazar case, because I mean, it's possible he knew John Lear before he got into Area 51. They could have been like, well, this guy has a connection to a guy interested in UFOs. It'd be a perfect one to pull this PSYOP on and get this false information out there. I think we had technology. I think, like I said, I've always believed Bob Lazar's story is true. But the way what he saw, it seemed like we weren't very far ahead with it. Like we were tinkering around with these things, but we really weren't, we were limited with what we had. And I with the accounts of abductees, especially in my lab, involvement and seeing personnel and that, it seems like we do have some kind of a ship of some kind out there, or multiple ships out there with this technology.
Yeah, as I said, I think all of that's possible. The problem is for us, the general public, we just don't see it until someone lets us, or 20 years later down the line, then they say, okay, we're going to show you something or whatever, kind of like they did with the stealth bomber. So, when you look at it like that, in terms of the UFO research community, we are pretty much kind of limited in what we can do, and that's one of the unfortunate aspects to it, really.
Well, it seems like the last couple of years have gotten really interesting in this field. With for one, the To the Stars project with Tom DeLonge and all that's come out. I've had some issues with that. We've talked about on the show. But Bigelow's involvement with that. What technology? They rumor or hint that he has some kind of alien material and technology, and they're working on his ship. It's like they're hinting like they're going to come out with something. But nothing is forthright yet come out, in my opinion, that's like totally mind-blowing. But I've always been interested in, like, what does Bigelow have in one of his R&D installations? What is he developing? Because he's had an interest in this for so long, and his government contacts, if he's one of these private contractors, I mean, of course he's got to keep it secret, but do you think somebody like that, a private contractor, one of these days will come out with something that'll be the TR-3B revealed, like we got the bomber revealed?
Well, it could, because, if somebody in the private sector were to do that, they, and they've got their own company, a big company, I could see how, a theoretical person could do that, because it would really make their mark in the in the world, really. They wouldn't be an agency of government, but they would become sort of possibly one of the most powerful corporations on the planet. And that issue of profits and money and everything else could be the one issue more than anything else that would convince them to come forward. But I mean, it's interesting, you know, that some of these people who are interested in this, you know, the whole issue of the UFO program and everything else, when it was revealed in 2017, at the end of 2020, what was it? End of 2017,
Yeah.
That's right. But a lot of those were also interested in the Skinwalker Ranch and the whole issue of like portals and doorways and all that kind of stuff. So they're clearly somebody is very interested in all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, if that, the biggest, I think, reason this technology, and again, this is X-Files, like total plot, their return season, is that the free energy. I mean, if it's possible to power these ships, you're talking about some kind of new energy source. It would change everything in this country. It would, everything in the world, the whole market, everything would change if you suddenly threw fossil fuels out the door, because we had this unlimited energy or this new kind of technology.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, the only thing that's preventing that, I think, is just economics. You know, there are a lot of people who have a lot to lose if we don't need oil anymore, you know. Now, but for the rest of us, in an ideal world, it might be a much better world, you know,
Right.
with clean energy and things like this and not reliant on oil and so on. But
Wouldn't that be the saddest reason for us not being told? Wouldn't that be the most despicable and saddest reason? We're just not being told because they don't want to ruin their profit margin or destroy their companies.
That's what it is. That's what it comes down to. It's like the status quo. You know, who's got the money and the power and the control wants to have the money, the power, and the control.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But for the rest of us, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, looking at like Russia. You know, we're talking about that, but we're talking about the Russian government. I mean, the Russian people are no different to us. You know, they're not our enemies. You know, Russia's our potential enemy, but the Russian people are just, you know, you could sit in a bar and have a laugh and a couple of beers with them, you know, and they're no different to us. But, you know, it's the people who are pulling the strings that are very often cause the problems, you know.
Well, you got to wonder, we have our own secret space program. Does Russia? I mean, there's just recently the whole, I don't know how much in depth somebody's gotten with the discovery of this, but the WikiLeaks dumps, saying, I saw recently one where they're like, oh, well, we had a base on the moon and Russia destroyed it. You know, what secret wars are happening between these other countries and their secret space programs. And nobody can reveal to anybody because, again, nobody wants to give up the game on, you know, free energy, I guess.
I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if there have been sort of clandestine flights here and there. That, you know, I mean, I haven't seen any proof of it, but I mean, I wouldn't sort of fall down in a dead faint if it was proved. You know what I mean? I'd just be like, well, I guess that was going on.
That makes sense. All right, we're going to go to our last commercial break here, and then we come back again. We'll have the phone lines open. You can call in, ask Nick Redfern a question. 219-230-4444, Skype ID OOJBland00. Those are two ways you can call in tonight. But ask a question or tell us about your UFO experience, or if you've had an abduction experience, I'd love to hear it tonight. When we be back with our guest, Nick Redfern. All right, guys, back in a short commercial break.
Don't be alarmed. It's only a laser sword fight. Don't be scared. It's only the Death Star destroying another world. Relax. It's only a movie, and it's all for fun. Director George Lucas and 20th Century Fox present Star Wars. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
At Lombank, we're with you every step of the way.
We sell your dreams.
We're not a soulless, monolithic institution.
We are, but we use nostalgic imagery.
It's walking into your dream home.
You can't really afford it. We'll lend you the money anyway.
It's kids graduating from college.
With pointless degrees riddled with debt.
It's happy picnics on the beach.
There's sewage in the water.
Family portraits with everyone dressed the same.
You look like twats.
Canoeing in the lake.
By the power station.
Catching fireflies in a jar.
And watching them die.
Cheering at high school football games.
The kids are giving each other brain damage.
These are the things our lives are made of.
Interest rates only 33.4%.
Bank. We're the American bank that truly, more or less, cares
about profits.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon, Leicester Square.
The Science of Crime is back for another season.
The cigarette was hotboxed. He was nervous about something. His orthopedic surgeon records indicate
that he was a deaf woman who plays guitar. Mermaids, multiple wives, threesomes. This is serious.
They're not detectives or scientists, but they act like they are. They're crime scene cops that take matters into their own hands. These guys are so smart, they never have to look anything up.
He was neurotic, with a love of puppies and experimental cooking.
I knew it. It's a partial lesion caused by light to medium tearing of the thoraxal cortex. Obviously, you can tell at a glance by the fingerprint on the mustard bottle. Andrews, my acting sucks ass.
The Science of Crime, it's forensically boring.
From deep space, the seed is planted. Terror grows.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Certificate X. Now showing London Pavilion, classic Oxford Street.
House at 8%. So they're okay. So, does anybody want to play Parcheesi? Okay, who brought the dog?
Tonight, we've been talking to Nick Redfern, author of Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. We've been discussing a lot of the topics in that book tonight, alien abductions, Mothman, other subjects. I want to, we get back to Nick here, also get into some of the other things that have been connected, like besides the Men in Black, is the black-eyed children. Another creepy experience people have had. We'll get into that a little bit tonight. But you can call in and tell us about your experience, or if you have a question, the phone lines are open. You can call in at 219-230-4444. Also, Skype ID OOJBland00. Seems the phone lines have been quiet tonight. Usually we've been rocking on the phone lines, but I know it's Easter. I don't usually do a show on Easter, but I wanted to do one tonight. Have a really great guest with us, Nick Redfern. So if you want to call in, we will take your call. We got a half an hour left. Ask a question of Nick or tell us about your experience. But let's go ahead and get back to the show. And man, my mouse being messed up has really screwed me up tonight. I even screwed up the commercial break there. People got a little background view there. How you doing, Nick? You still with us?
Yeah, all good, thanks.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of came up in one abductees' experience of seeing their, I guess, hybrid children as a common experience that people describe. But the children having black eyes, I thought that was really interesting when you talk about all the what's more of a modern phenomenon with the black-eyed children.
Well, yeah, the first sort of public story of the black-eyed children came out in the late 1990s from a guy named Brian Bethel, a Texas journalist, and he'd had a late night encounter with these sort of two creepy kids who had like solid black eyes. You know, the entire eye was just black, not just the center part, the whole eye.
Right.
And reports sort of trickled after about 97, 98, through to the early 2000s, and then it was sort of 2007, 8 onward, that it really began to take off, and where people described how there'd be like a knock on the door late at night, and someone would sort of have the chain on and just peer through the door because it's like 11 o'clock or something, and there's these sort of two, again, kind of not unlike the Men in Black, sort of very pale, and the skin looks plastic-like, and there's a lot of parallels between the Men in Black and the black-eyed children. Both of them try to find a way into the house and so on. But people also felt like hypnotized, as if they felt compelled to open the door and let them in, which obviously most people wouldn't do, but people do. And David Weatherly is a good friend of mine. David's without doubt sort of the main expert on the black-eyed children phenomenon, and he's got a huge number of reports, and there's no doubt in my mind it's a real phenomenon. Now, are they extraterrestrial? Are they alien-human hybrids? Are they paranormal? Most of the people I know who've looked into this and researched it have come to the view that it's more like a paranormal thing. All of this could be interconnected, but that rather than literal, alien-human hybrids, a lot of people have sort of suggested they are more sort of supernatural or even sort of occult-based, that kind of thing.
See, but to me, I'm one of those people, like I said, I named the show Paranormal Soup. I always, my brain goes to how these things might be connected. And it will, like with the Men in Black, how they kind of appear out of nowhere sometimes, and these kids, they appear out of nowhere. They do things that are odd. Besides having black eyes, I mean, they do things that are odd, like they don't understand certain concepts or certain normal day things. They're alien.
Well, a good example is, with the Men in Black and the black-eyed children, neither of them really sort of force their way into the house. Both of them,
like vampires,
they actually find a way to be invited in, and that does sound like the old legends of vampires, where they have to be invited in before they can sort of cross the doorway. So maybe old legends of vampires are sort of based on some of these earlier cases, but the black-eyed children, I mean, the parallels between the Men in Black are significant, because most of the Men in Black reports, they have like a black fedora. Most of the black-eyed kids wear like a hat as well, but it's in the form of a black hoodie.
Right.
Then you've got the skins the same, like sort of plastic and waxy and pale. Both groups have to be invited in. It's almost like they have rules. As bizarre as it sounds, it's almost like they have rules and regulations that they have to kind of stand by. Now, one of the creepiest and most sinister aspects is that whether it's the black-eyed children or the Men in Black, a number of people who've got in close proximity to them have fallen sick or ill afterwards.
There's like an illness
and
involved
sometimes
with it.
quite quickly afterwards, almost like a supernatural infection, that kind of thing. And there's quite a few cases like that. Just getting close to them can be literally physically dangerous to you.
Again, it makes you wonder what's going on, if it's something interdimensionally or somehow it's affecting somebody. I mean, another thing I like to try to tie in is I've had shadow person experience of something major event that happened to me when I was 17, 18 years old, and I've never said it's demonic. I've always felt it was something alien-esque or alien-like.
Did it have like the hat on as well?
I had multiple experience with this over a 4-month period, and the one time it walked up to me in the middle of the night. I was smoking a cigarette outside, sneaking a cigarette, and this thing walked out of the woods and right up to me, and that one had a hat. Now, I wouldn't see it with a hat every time, but that one I saw out in plain, I'm clearly awake, this thing's walking right up to me, had a hat. I guess I wouldn't say, I would like to say it's a hat, but it was tall. It was like like the head was too long or too tall. So I would say it was a shadow hat. Best I could say it. We do have another phone call online here. We got a call 309 area code. Who do we got?
Hey, it's Diana.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for calling in.
I called in last week. My friends were asking me to call on the chat. But anyway, I don't know if you remember, but I told you I would have this dream where this really tall, like, creature was trying to get into my house.
Yes.
And I found out, like, as an adult, that the house I was raised in, the previous owners, like, would do black magic and trip on acid in the house. And just crazy stuff. And then I would always have these other dreams about these little troll things that you guys were talking about, and their eyes were black and their skin was green. And last night, I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I was like looking up demonology, and I think it was from a show I was watching. The demon referred to is Zozo and The Exorcist. Combines himself as like a cat, and his skin is green, and he can show himself in like human form as well. And what I saw when I was like a kid in my dream, like beckoning me to let it in, had like a feline type nose, and I'm like, oh my God. And his skin was green, and he was like in a black trench coat. And I don't know. And then the third time that I had like an experience with something with black. My friend's mom had like committed suicide, and I was sleeping, and I woke up in sleep paralysis, and this shadow was like diagonal to the bed, like in the bathroom with its hand on the door, and he had a human form, but like that his head was the shape of a gray alien, but complete shadow, darker than the dark behind him. And he had his head like cocked to the side like he was studying me. But as soon as I like snapped out of the paralysis, he was gone. And the paralysis only lasted like 5 or 10 seconds, if that. But I don't know.
Well, you
Have
said
you guys looked into it, like heard anything about that type
That's
of
why
stuff,
I always went
or-
with the alien route with my shadow person experiences, because I hate calling it the Hat Man experience, but what I saw had this elongated head, and it was all dark, completely void of any light, just this like black cutout, but it moved, and it was the weirdest experience.
Okay, well,
I know, Nick, you've probably heard tons of stories along these lines.
Yeah, I have a lot of stories where, people have had sleep paralysis, and in many cases, they see a shadow of like someone in a black suit, and very often like a fedora, and sometimes what they call like a stovepipe hat, like an old
stovepipe
style
hat, like Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of thought it was like.
Yeah, there's some like that. But it's interesting what you said at the beginning about like black magic and acid, because there are a lot of cases where people who, have taken like hallucinogenic drugs,
DMT,
or things like, for example, like peyote or DMT, and I think in many of these cases people aren't hallucinating. I think when you're in that altered state, it actually allows you to see things that you don't see in a normal state, and it's things that are around us that you don't see normally, but that you can when your mind is in an altered state. And I think also there's a possibility, which is kind of a sinister possibility, that when people kind of think about these phenomena, it's almost as if the phenomena knows. It's like it knows that
it's like an
you're
open
thinking
invitation.
about it.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, but it's like an open invitation. Yeah. But it's difficult not to think about it. It's hard not to think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
before I even heard of ayahuasca and iboga and like all that other stuff, I was 18. All my friends were always older than me, but I took mushrooms once, and I was always real like self-conscious. And my friends were like, okay, cover the mirrors and like don't let her go to the bathroom alone. And all this is the first time and the last time as well. But I was like, no, I'm going to go out like side alone. And I sat like by this tree, and I just got all these thoughts and ideas and emotions came to me that I was loved indefinitely. Even like everything is loved.
That
and,
was
like,
a good
no matter
trip.
what happens, you know, everything is like for a greater cause, and it's supposed to be happening. But there is like unconditional love behind it, like just what you said.
Well, you're lucky
And
you had a good trip.
It changed me forever.
You're-
Like I went inside and I like looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my God, I'm beautiful. But I was like 18, you know, and it was just changed my life. And I think pot does the same thing.
Well, my one
Like,
experience
open-
with mushrooms was not a good one, and never did it again. So you're
Well,
lucky.
alone in the woods, maybe.
Well, part of it is, you know, what they call, you know, basically, you know, the fight or flight. You know, if particularly with like LSD, if you're in a good vibe, then the response is going to be good. If you're in a bad vibe, it's, you know, it can come out really bad.
You're going to have a bad time.
You know, yes, and sometimes, you know, it has affected people for their entire lives. But then from the other perspective, like you said with yours, you know, it was like a very positive thing, and, you know, like this unconditional love, and, you know, there was this situation going on. I think, you know, how you respond to the you know, whatever actually it is, you know, if it's LSD, if it's DMT, if it's mushrooms, if you have a positive response to it, then I think that's, you know, potentially allows you to sort of to start thinking about different concepts, and also, you know, the ability, you know, when you're under the influence, so to speak, to see things and encounter things that you know you would not see normally. DMT is probably the best example for having an interaction with strange beings. You know, people who have DMT more than anything else, you know, they get that experience of seeing strange little creatures and whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I had no doubt, I believe they're real, because my experience with mushrooms, it was a knowing, like I knew. But when it's evil, when the evil comes, it's so bad. And I believe, you guys had me thinking, like the black eyes, you know, I think they're under a skin when we see them in certain forms for intimidation. And they know what scares us, and they know our folklore. And it's probably some black mass that can, like, duplicate itself. And, you know, they become conscious. Like, some people believe that us, right now, we are a link off of a soul somewhere else, like a universal soul. It's real deep. It's hard to
deeper you
explain,
go down the
but I
rabbit
think it's
hole.
the same with them. And, like, I like the little troll things, and then that thing that came to me is Baal or Baal.
Yeah.
Whatever, Zozo, whatever you want to call them. You're not supposed to say their names, so fuck. But
Well, you're not supposed to say that either on my show. Well, thank you for calling.
Oh my God,
It's all
no. Just be positive. We're good.
Well,
but
thank
like,
you for calling
sorry,
in.
I'm the one who curses. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Well,
But
thank you
I'll
for
stop.
calling in, though. I do
I'll
have somebody else
stop.
that's trying to call in too right now. But thank you for
good,
sharing
good.
that in.
You're
Thanks a
welcome. See you later.
Bye.
Yeah.
But yeah, you wonder what are the interdimensional connections to this, you know, DMT. I mean, what was it? I think it was Alex Jones just recently on the Joe Rogan show saying there's like government cabal tripping on DMT, communicating with aliens with it and stuff like that. I mean, he might have a point. He might have a point, because you think back to what like the Nazis got into with people who were channeling and getting information, and that through that they say they got alien technology that way through channeling.
Yeah, I think when it comes to particularly drugs that, you know, give you a mind altering or expansive situation, I think that's one of the reasons why the usage of it has been frowned on by a lot of people, because you imagine like a world where everyone is enlightened and, you know, thinking in a completely different way than we do normally, but in a positive way. People, you know, people in power don't want that. They want us, you know, basically, you know, the slaves, you know, birth, school, work, death kind of thing. You know what I mean?
They want us to be Jerry Springer, man. A Jerry Springer show ongoing. We're distracted by nonsense and stupidity and drama. We do have another phone call online. We'll take one more here. We got Zach on the phone. How you doing tonight, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good, brother. Happy Easter. How you doing?
Happy Easter, Zach. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Zach.
Hey, Nick. Just wanted to relay my one of my many different UFO experiences and just get your insight into my experience. So this incident occurred, I would probably say, almost 7 years ago. And I was driving home from my at the time it was my girlfriend, now it's my fiance's house. And I was on the Gila River Reservation out in Arizona. And I'm along AZ Highway 87. And out there, I mean, there's some homes, but for the most part, it's just all desert. It was about, I'd say maybe like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm driving along, and I look to the west of me. There's some mountains, and there's a radio tower that is at the top of the mountain. And I see these two bright balls of light that are right near the radio tower. And immediately, it took about maybe 3 seconds after I saw them, one of the balls of light turned bright orange, and another one turned like a shade of light blue, I can describe it. The one that turned blue, it immediately just vanished as soon as it changed color. And then about maybe 2 seconds after that first ball disappeared, the orange one disappeared as well. And I haven't seen anything like that up close. But ever since then, as well, as I'm driving on that stretch of the reservation, I mean, I'll see some little stuff up in the sky. Like I'll see just look like objects that are changing different colors of blue and red up in the sky, but nothing really that matched that experience. Could you give me your insight into the experience that I had?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are actually a lot of reports in the UFO subject where people haven't sort of just seen like nuts and bolts metal craft or whatever, but where people have reported seeing strange balls of light. And many of the witnesses who have seen these balls of light up close have felt that they were some sort of living thing themselves, but like a living energy in the form of a ball. And there are a lot of cases like that where people have got close to these balls of light, and the balls of light then have sort of moved away. And then as a person walks a bit closer, maybe then the light will come closer to them. And they're typically between sort of the size of like a soccer ball up to like a beach ball, that kind of thing. And a lot of the, interestingly enough, a lot of the early contactees in the 1950s said that their first encounters were with not like a long-haired alien, but where they saw a ball of light come to them, and then like messages were sort of beamed into their mind. And but you can find stories of these strange balls of light everywhere. For example, in North Carolina, they have the Brown Mountains.
Right.
If you Google Brown Mountain light, you'll see a story there where there have been these strange balls of light flying all around the Brown Mountains in North Carolina. And there's a place called Ghost Light Road in Texas in an area called the Big Thicket, and they have these balls of light there as well. And again, witnesses say it was almost like as if they were intelligent and, you know, wanted to be seen somehow.
And it was near an Indian reservation too, Zach. Right?
But you get a lot of weird stuff on
Reservations.
Native American reservations, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you said that it's they're almost like living energies, really, because when they first changed the shades of color, I mean, it's almost like that. At least I felt that they had changed color because they realized that somebody was watching them, and in case that was me, as I was driving along there, and these balls of light, they were definitely way larger than a beach ball. I can't even describe the size of it themselves, but it's definitely an experience that I've personally never had any other experience like that before. So I wanted to see what insight you can give me on that.
Well, thank you for calling in, Zach.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Nick, for answering my question. You guys have a good night, and have a happy Easter.
Yeah, happy Easter, Zach. Thanks.
Thanks, you too.
You know, but like you said, he was near an Indian reservation. It seems like a lot of these instances, and there's a lot of reports near Indian reservations or on Indian reservations, would be a good place for aliens to kind of hide out.
Yeah, and I mean, also, you know, look at like the Skinwalker Ranch, you know, that has ties to Native American people as well, and, you know, a lot of strange creatures being seen there also.
And the balls of light, I mean, we've had a guest on here, Chad and Alta Dillard. They wrote a book called Abducted, where they were taken by an orb of light. It was just a glowing orb of light. And, I mean, who knows? I've always wondered, are they probes or are they their own kind of interdimensional craft? You know, I've had a fascination with, actually, the orb phenomenon or ghost lights, because, you know the idea is that they're living creatures of some kind, and they, these telepathic messages that they're able to do. We could be dealing with a whole other kind of phenomenon. And the early, the Foo Fighter phenomenon of the World War II and the pilots, and that was very much like orb UFOs as well.
Yeah. Well, what it really shows, you know, we're still struggling really after 70 years after Kenneth Arnold's sighting. You know, we're still struggling for the answers. We know there's a phenomenon, but we're still kind of stuck for the, you know, for that definitive answer. You know.
Well, there's a lot of people that claim they have them. There's a lot of, you know, we've had a lot of people come out that say they've had inside knowledge, but we have to deal with the fact of how much of that is disinformation. That seems to be the constant battle. It's like, is what we're given really the truth, or is it just some other psyop mind game played on us or played against another country?
Or is it both?
or both, yeah, right. I mean, there could be multiple purposes to what their agenda is, and then we have the idea of, you know, you have the people like Stephen Greer saying that they could with the technology make a fake alien invasion happen to propose the New World Order or whatever. Is a thought, like a Project Bluebeam kind of thing, where they fake an alien invasion.
Well, yeah, I mean, that scenario has been played out in a lot of sci-fi stories, so, you know, sometimes sci-fi becomes fact, you know, rather than sci-fiction. So.
Well, you wonder, I mean, you know, if there is an agenda to make a one-world government, that might be their final backup plan. They couldn't get us to get together on global warming or climate change, so let's switch tactics and say the aliens are invading, and now we all have to come together as one world government. I mean, the alien abductees with the visions of nuclear war and these ideas of a communist-like society by the aliens, it seems like they're trying to engineer us or influence us to change what we're doing. I don't know if they want us to have a one world government, but they definitely want us to change our not have a nuclear war against each other.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it isn't. I mean,
we can keep that at bay.
Well, and you have the cases of them. I mean, how much interest? I mean, how many UFO sightings have been around nuclear installations, and they're shutting down nuclear missiles.
Yeah, that's right.
And all this seemed to start. I mean, to me, you know, I mean, of course, we were talking about the fairies and all of this, you know, abductions and all that could go way thousands of years back. but the whole UFO phenomenon, the wave, everything seems to have like blown up after the atomic bomb.
But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there's a huge increase in the whole phenomenon from the 40s onwards. I mean, it's not like in the 30s and 20s we didn't have cameras and telescopes or whatever. We did, so it can't be put down to the fact that people didn't have the ability to look for these things then. 20s and 30s, they clearly did. So there's definitely been an increase, in the post-war era, Second World War, I mean.
It seems to be centered around our ability to blow ourselves up. I mean, the visions you talk about in the book, I mean, it's all about our ability now to harm ourselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the best things we do, is like destroy things, I mean.
We don't need an alien invasion. We can destroy ourselves just fine. Yeah, exactly. You also have to wonder, too, I mean, if we have our own My Lab thing going on and all that, you have to wonder what Russia or what China is doing on their end to control their situation. What kind of things are they doing? Are they faking alien abductions as well? Or what are they pulling? That's the question.
And I think, like I said earlier, that a lot of people in ufology don't appreciate the extent to which, yes, there's a real UFO phenomenon, but there's also a lot of fabricated stuff to hide the real phenomenon, but also to mess with the minds of opposing countries or whatever. So there's a lot of different stuff that comprises the phenomenon, and some of them are real and some of them are fabricated for, really weird reasons.
It's a land of illusion. We don't know what's real and what's not, but we know something's going on. We definitely do.
Exactly.
And to me, having you do the work that you do, doing the research you do, we need more Nick Redfords in the world to try to get this information out there and start getting people to ask these questions of our government. What is going on? I mean, they're human beings that work in our government, but there's obviously somebody behind the curtain that is manipulating all these things. There's got to be some kind of control that's just ultimately keeping it out of the public eye.
Somewhere, somewhere there is a sort of core organization that knows, and I think some people in the FBI might know, some people in the NSA and the CIA might know, but there is somebody or a group that knows that just about what there is to know, they know. But
some kind of majestic 12, some kind of
but we just haven't found them yet. That's the problem. So.
Yeah, and who knows if we ever will. I mean, I guess it'll be on them when we get to find out some way or some other. Well, Nick, I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It was truly awesome to have you back on. I totally loved the book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. People, go check it out. But thank you again, Nick, for being on.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Jason. Had a good time. Thank you.
All right, guys, that's it for the show. We will be back next Sunday. I don't even remember who I had scheduled for next Sunday. We're getting booked. We're getting booked way into advance. As Gary Williams, actually, we'll have on. A psychic medium we'll have on. I think Gavin Lee Davis got me this hookup for him. So we'll have him on next week, guys. You'll be able to call into the show and ask Gary questions as well. Thanks again for everybody watching. Thank you, Nick, for being on the show. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page. $2 a month. You get access to our exclusive content. Check out our Time Slips and Dimensional Shifts podcast we have on there. You can only listen if you become a patron. And thank you to all my patrons who do support this show. Without you, we wouldn't be able to help go to the cost of streaming out to all these places that we do. Thanks again, guys. All right, that's it. See you next week with Gary Williams as our guest. Oh, also, don't forget to subscribe and follow, if you haven't, to our Facebook page, Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. You can also email me at paranormalsoupjbland@gmail.com. If you have guest suggestions or contacts, send it there. Let me know. I'm going to be coming out with a newsletter here in the future, too. Probably be running through that email. I will get more information out to you guys. But thanks again for everybody watching. See you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Have a happy Easter.
Oh,